pledge of allegiance first.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Oh, we're a little sparse right now, so.
Mr. Fontella?
So Julie's stuck in traffic.
Running
We'll be
late,
here
so
as soon as she can.
we'll get it when we can.
Have we heard from the other members?
Why don't we start with board business then? We have to wait for Judy anyway.
Right.
No bills, right?
No bills, no payroll, we did those last week.
Yeah, we got nothing to do.
Under 8:30, Turkey Farm Estates will be in to request a bond reduction.
Okay.
They did a bond spreadsheet, Green reviewed it, and they'll have numbers for you requesting them.
And what was I supposed to, what are you gonna remind me to ask him?
About the maintenance of, or the reconstruction of the first detention basin.
I mean, the one that's a lake.
That would be the one.
Down.
Yeah.
What about the second one that's a lake too? Are they doing, the one they put the pipe in, are they doing anything for that one? Or are they-
Actually, that one's looking pretty good.
Actually, I saw it yesterday, it didn't look too bad. Well, consider it's the end of the summer, you know?
I heard a good story. I was out on site today looking at the location for the mailboxes and the community mailbox. And one of the construction guys was relaying that he was talking with one of the residents, and the resident had several boys, and they like to bring home the things that they were finding out in the open space areas. And so they brought home a frog, and they brought home a turtle, and they brought home a snake. Just brought them into the parents' room to show it out.
That was nice.
Lots of wildlife in the.
All in our open space. See, look at that.
Children are
See,
enjoying.
you know what? Richard was right. That's where the animals are gonna go, that open space, the snakes and the frogs and the turtles.
They
Corridors.
followed the painted lines in the grass and stayed in that corridor.
As long as it's damp,
Guys are
they can make it as long as it's wet over there. I noticed they were all amphibians, right?
The best part about it is everybody keeps blaming Richard for the wildlife corridors when it was totally me that that did it through the whole process. And they blame Richard.
Where's the camera when you need
You
it?
blame Richard.
Anyway,
So, and then the good part of that was we were able to come to a consensus and a recommendation on where to put the community mailboxes. So an open space area, A, behind the sidewalk, on Fraser Street near the intersection with Grimes Lane. So it can be outside of the roadway right away, so DPW director is happy. It could be enclosed in an easement that goes to the homeowners association, so it's clear that the homeowners association is responsible for maintenance of that area.
the only problem with that is, again, most people are gonna go up Grimes Lane to get to it. Or a lot of them,
Well,
you know,
Well, Grimes Lane at some point should be an improved road, so
at some point, you know. I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime, but,
I think we'll probably see it in the next 5 to 10 years.
oh, listen to you, you're so optimistic.
well, the plan
Well,
is to have
hopefully-
it added to the tip.
Well, not only that, if the MBTA decides to buy the property across the street, we should make it a condition that,
I don't think they're buying it. I think they're leasing it.
I mean, they're not gonna buy it.
They're gonna lease it.
So does that mean we'll still get tax money out of it then?
Well, it still belongs to a landholder.
All right, then we're still, okay. All right,
So I
cool.
think it's worth a discussion when that hearing
Anyway,
reopens.
yeah.
It's not a bad idea to
Yeah.
see if we can get something.
Well, let's make a deal. Monty Hall over there. That's behind door number 1. What else? Nothing. We should have left it off the screen.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I would unplug it except that.
So our next meetings are
Okay,
November 4th, right?
November?
I mean, October 4th.
Yes.
Right.
October 4th is the next planning board meeting. We have lots of continued public hearings for projects that are open in front of you.
We're, Roger's meeting with the residents this month.
24th.
Can you make it?
I'm gonna try, I think so.
Okay, I said I would go too. He's got like 8 other neighbors and he's gonna at least sit down and talk to anyway.
Yep. His engineer has submitted updated plans, and those are posted to the project page already.
And if I can make it, I do have some extenuating circumstances that have come up. If I can, I'll let you know. Would you mind?
Yeah, no, this coming Monday.
Yeah.
It's gonna be in 103, right?
220 something, over by COA.
Oh, all right. Okay. What else? What else you wanna talk about?
So Thursday, October 14th is the public, what are we calling it, workshop? It's open house, that's what we're calling it.
Open
Littleton
house.
Common Revitalization Open House, where, let's see, consultant team Fort Point Associates will be providing information that's been gathered since the July public workshop, and be using that time to gather feedback from residents on the various aspects of the So, and then that puts town meeting, of course, October 29th. And then you'll meet again November 1st.
Pick a seat, any seat.
They all look good.
So that's, and then town meeting is the,
Monday, October 29th.
so do you wanna handle the, Mr. Mullen, do you wanna handle the accessory dwelling, the Rollins? And I'll handle the senior residential, or how do you wanna do it?
Anna, you have any thoughts on the accessory bylaw and the added amendment? We're really not revising, because what exists is going to remain.
Right.
With some small revisions to it, but then
Right.
mostly it's a new, we're actually going back and adopting something we used to have with some modifications to it.
Yeah, it's clarifying it. Yeah, yeah. No, makes sense to me.
At a town meeting, that's,
then you can do recommendations at that time. And then we'll also be asking for a recommendation on the capital request, the $42,000 request for form-based code. I would recommend, hope you will wait till after the
Yeah, don't-
presentation.
Yeah.
Didn't know if there were any other articles that you wanted to weigh in on.
And Sam's going to be there, someone from the Point will be here this evening?
Yes.
I looked at Party Plus or whatever it is. I didn't think it was that bad. It's had a big Halloween sign in the middle of it.
Yes,
So what's wrong with that?
it looks bad.
It's got a Halloween sign.
Yeah, between a brick wall.
But it's in the windows.
Difference of opinion.
It's haphazard.
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 It's only going to last till Halloween. You know? I thought the window dressing looked nice. Not that I'm a big Party Plus person, but I didn't see a problem. Never mind, forget it. I'm not going to convince you of anything anyway. I might as well quit while I'm behind.
Well, I will say this about Party City. I was in Waltham the other day, drove by a Party City, and they have the exact clean pictures of happy people in their windows as well, so
So-
it must be a Party City thing. So I actually have something not on the agenda. Is that okay?
Depends on what it is.
Depends on what it is. Well, I think that given the past couple of months, we've made some good strides in where we are in working together, but I think that if we have a retreat option available to us, that would allow us to set some more processes in place that I think would be really helpful to making our planning board team work better. So
A retreat.
I would like to propose that we officially have a retreat in the near future.
I think in the near future, as in the new year perhaps,
Yeah, that would be fine.
just with all the things that are on our agenda. That being said, do you have any idea what the retreat will entail for the team, the planning board team?
Right. So I think part of it can be around process and how it is that we would like to be able to talk about things here, talk about things outside of here, which, you know, obviously there are open meeting laws about all that. Being able to identify, for example, as we go through and talk about senior housing, as we talk about affordable housing, as we talk about commercial development, I mean, being very reactive to what comes to us is oftentimes challenging. So if we can at least have some sense of what we'd like to see in the town, again, using the master plan as a directive, that would be helpful, or as a guideline, I should say, not a directive.
Where would you like to have this retreat?
No, we don't have to go and spend any, you know, go and spend a lot of money. I mean, we could probably even do it at, I don't know, I'm thinking, what wouldn't cost.
Are you thinking like an afternoon or an evening or an
Yeah, I'm thinking
overnight or
probably, you know,
a slumber party?
6 hours, no slumber parties, Mark. About 6 hours, maybe?
Oh, all right. So somewhere, okay.
Yeah. Yep,
We could do that.
I'm agreeable. I think it's a good idea.
okay.
Get some of the citizen planner trainers to come in and
Oh, that's a great idea.
Planning board
Yeah.
potluck meeting.
I mean, we have plenty of spaces.
We do. Only problem is we have them here, we can't drink.
That depends on the warrant item, if
Okay.
it gets passed.
I don't think we can anyway.
I'm kidding.
It's okay.
I've been at the other building for a half hour.
And that's the last, and that's the last thing, anything else? Okay. No problem. No problem. Sorry to keep waiting. We're going through other board business, so we're good.
We did nothing, admit it.
You took a vote. I was very
One
impressed.
vote. All right. So, our 6:30. We're running a little late, but that's all right, you know. We'll make it up in volume. Julie, you want to give us a, when you get ready, a brief overview of form-based code form-based code?
Sure,
Stop.
yes, I'm ready,
Okay, go ahead, go
Okay.
for it.
if you're ready. So let's see, I should probably use these.
There's, yeah, whichever one you like.
Yeah, that-
Take them all.
Right,
Okay, all right. So,
and that's not for voice, that's just for the TV.
okay, great. So thank you so much, and my sincere apologies. I was overprepared. So I wanted to come to you tonight and just give you a little bit of an overview of our proposal. This is part of the Littleton Common Revitalization Plan that we're currently working on. It's a great and dynamic project, and our consultant team is listed here. Maren, do you want to? Okay. So before I went right into the form-based code, I wanted to give everybody just sort of a little bit of a flavor, an overview as to what our planning project is about and where we're at with that. And I'll try to go through this a little quickly, but please stop me if you have any questions. So really our goal for the revitalization project, and is everybody here, everybody's familiar with this part of the project, right, for Littleton Common? So, okay. So I'll skip ahead, which is that, you know, we're basically trying to find a way to implement the vision that came forward in the master planning process for the Common, as illustrated here. And some of the particularities that came forward are things that we're working on right now with the planning project and then advancing them through in a zoning concept. Just to be clear about the area that we're analyzing is this area that is highlighted in the dashed red. The area of analysis is the specific area in which we are evaluating each of the properties for revitalization, for redevelopment potential. However, the entire area circled in essentially this orange is the area of influence. You can't ignore any adjacent parcels and any sort of land use patterns that go along with this area. And just to also be clear that this is essentially the Littleton Business District, Village Common Business District, in addition, some parcels from the industrial district. So, status of this project, give you a sense of where we're at. We're kind of essentially in the middle of the project. We did a lot of work in the beginning of the project, which I'll just briefly overview, to really get things kicked off and started and moving forward. We're at a process now where we have some decisions to make about how to advance the plan that we're developing within a proper zoning scheme. So that's why I'm before you tonight. The rest of the project will basically be informed by what happens with our proposal in terms of what type of zoning changes and regulation we will prepare. Next slide. So, as mentioned, we've done a lot of work. We've been coming before the Master Plan Implementation Committee a number of times. That we've been working with them directly on this project. And obviously, we've now moved into the redevelopment scenarios and market analysis piece, and our task at hand have been, you know, additional public engagement. We had our public workshop on July 17th, which I'm sure a lot of you are at. And we want to advance a lot of the feedback. We got some very important and very specific feedback from that process that we want to ensure goes into the plan and the zoning analysis. So just, I'll be quick here, but I want to give you a bit of an update on the scenarios. Again, the goal here for us, it's a very important part of this project because for us to be able to determine what zoning changes, what regulatory changes need to be made, we need to really sort of nail down what the vision is for the Common. There was a lot of very important information that came out of the master planning process, but we needed to tease that out a bit to understand what the real sort of scale and scope of development the town and stakeholders are interested in. So that's essentially the goal of why we prepared various scenarios. Next one. So you're going to see this visual a couple of times. It's a good illustration of what we saw as the vision initially for the common. And so we refer to this for our planning team to ensure that we are sort of on the right track. So what we did here is basically took a couple of parcels that are immediately adjacent to the common itself as example parcels to see what some of the initial desires of the town would look like. This is not to say that that's something that can be done yet right now, but just keep this as sort of a scale in your mind, that this is sort of the types of redevelopment that we heard from the town. Next slide. And I thought it would be important also so you could understand how we did this just very quickly, because it's important to know that you can't necessarily do a scenario for 60 to 70 to 80 parcels. We wanted to find what we call the soft sites, which are the most representative parcels, or also, interestingly, the most challenging parcels, so that we could really get an understanding of what the opportunities and challenges are. So you'll see that in the next slide. So how do we test that? So we tried to figure out what's the current density, where are the historic buildings, what are the age and type of your building stock and housing stock, is there any lots that are underutilized, et cetera. So once we had a good understanding there, we could then narrow it down to the next slide, which was, okay, what parcels from that should we take and create these test fits? That is to say that you test the type of density, dimensions, et cetera, changes that we think we heard that the town wants to see, and see what that would look like. So that's essentially what we did with the scenarios. So the first one, and also just to give you an idea, the sample area, again, was a representation of a lot of different types of parcels, challenging parcels, some lots that were very skinny, some that were larger, that were only utilized in one spot in terms of the structures. So we have a good variation, a good representation. So that's what you'll see in this. Clearly, you have to look at existing conditions, which is, this is what you have and what you can, basically what you are maintaining, let's say, under your current regulations in terms of sort of uses and size. The next shows how we went through, and again, this is information from the public workshop, but I wanted to be sure everybody was, with me on this in terms of the information. It's for us to then say, okay, a couple of scenarios would be if you maintained the current wastewater scheme without your sewering system, is scenario one, and what can you do with zoning to make any, essentially minor redevelopment of the parcels. And scenario two then takes that to the next level, which is, okay, if you, let's say, increased your wastewater capacity, what else could be included on a parcel under your current scheme? So minor tweaks, existing zoning, but essentially just sort of different allowances based on infrastructure, let's say. Next one is really what people were drawn to. Scenario three, don't mind the title. We're calling it side by side, which is because there's a way that you can also have these types of uses stacked up higher, so you'll have higher height. But we understand that is a scenario that the town has some residents and town members has some concerns just in terms of massing and the height of buildings. So this one is what we think has been sort of the preferred scenario, if you will, in terms of density, in terms of height of buildings, in terms of the type of mixed uses. Now, what we didn't realize was those mix of uses was something that we needed to further analyze. So in terms of what type of commercial or what type of, can you have a mix of office and different types of commercial and retail. And so we've tweaked that further. So moving to the next element is where we're at now. The analysis, we've taken this from the public workshop. This is new information, so obviously needs to be discussed with the implementation committee. But to give you an understanding, now we are including office. We are including a varied mix of uses so that we can best analyze what type of zoning would be required, what changes would be needed. Now, and I want to be clear that this is a scenario, meaning that we don't expect that the town would want to say, per se, this is exactly how our building scope and scale should look. This is more of like, let's say, using Legos versus using sort of Connects and a whole series of landscape to determine a model. This is the first step that you take just to understand, again, the scale of development. So this is where we are basing our information from in terms of where we would move forward with regulation changes. Now, that said, we are preparing a revitalization plan that will go broader than that because clearly things change over time, and we're looking at this from a 10-year, 30-year perspective. What may happen over the next couple of years will be potentially different than the next 10 years and then further. So the plan itself will be more of a guidance for the town and for developers in terms of what are the other options. So the other option here is looking at scenario 4. These are some visuals in terms of what we used for showing folks what the scale would look like. This is examples only. Going to scenario 4 is something I think the team understands may be a little too dense for the town to accept wholeheartedly. However, again, it's important to just kind of have this in the back of your mind because nothing's set in stone. We're not abandoning this per se, but the feedback that we have received thus far has been far more of an interest in, maybe not as high of buildings, perhaps an exchange of residential within the buildings themselves, that you could have even some real innovations like decks, a second-story floor with a deck that is overlooking the retail space in front. A lot of this is also to improve the streetscape and the feel of the sidewalk, of the road, of trying to make this a walkable, pedestrian-friendly, villagey type of common, where people are out on the streets and people are walking around and moving in different ways. So the next slide will just give you a scale that's a little different. And again, we're not necessarily basing the zoning off of this particular scenario, but just to say that in time, there may be an interest in higher height and more density. So moving into the next slide is just merely giving you a sense of how we move forward, how we move through the scenarios, and what the summary of changes would be. These zoning changes that we are suggesting are basics. They are, they're by no means a lot of the ins and outs and the details of design that would need to be required. This is sort of your base of if you want this scale of development for scenario 3 and 4 in the future, these are the types of changes that would need to be made. So that said, we're at a place now. Oh, actually, that's okay. One thing I did want to mention was that as we do these scenarios, you do need to, of course, take a real look at the streetscape and what improvements could be made either within rights of way, by the town, and or with working with property owners. So the next slide just gives you an illustration of what these scales would be. It's important, very important, particularly in form-based code work, to ensure that you're looking at this type of streetscape and the landscaping and everything that goes along with having a neighborhood, having a connected area. So you can go forward through the next slide, it's just a different variation. But the important thing here is, again, so now we've gone through this process and we needed, of course, to take a look back. Are we on target with what the initial interests from the master planning process were? And I'd say that we are. This is a direct representation of the general sort of buckets of interests that we've heard. Mixed use scenario is the biggest. Scenario 3 in particular, and how do you achieve that successfully? And that's why, so the next step is what we're proposing here for form-based code. So before I get into what that would entail, is there, I guess, do I have a moment to ask if there's any questions about how we've arrived at where we are? Nope. Okay, good. I guess that's a good thing when there aren't questions. So right now, our project includes looking at the existing zoning code and any particular articles that relate to how you achieve this, preferred scenario within the common. And that can be done by changing the dimensional uses, by changing even the allowed uses, whether it's by right or special permit. There's ways that can be done. We understand that there was zoning amendments in, I believe, 2010 to move the zoning code generally into more of a place for the smart growth, the state's 40B, I think, whatever they're targeting, that smart growth code, where you can have mixed use, and there is a provision within existing zoning in terms of mixed use, and how the building design should be at least considered. However, right from the start, throughout the first month of the project, and then when we went so we started in May and moved very quickly through June, and then had the first public workshop in July, in mid-July, we slowly started to recognize that is that regulatory change enough? Could we accomplish what the town wants that way? So form-based code is something that we started to think about. I know it's new to Massachusetts, but it's been pretty successful across the country in different areas for various reasons. I think there's a lot of intricacies to creating a code like this, but let's just say the basics are that instead of having one base zoning code, you have a section of a code that is very prescriptive, and it gives a lot of guidance to developers and to the town to ensure that whatever vision is created, has been, created for an area, for a district, let's say, like Littleton Common, can actually be achieved easily. I think that the one thing that the team started to understand was that if typical procedures are kept in place where a developer comes before the planning board and the zoning board and oftentimes has to ask for a zoning variance for a use or for changes to dimensional standards, that process itself is sort of it's on a case-by-case basis almost, and yet the difficulty there is how do you achieve a larger vision for a district area when that's the process. So we thought that there'd be two benefits here. Form-based code, it looks at your land uses by the physical form versus trying to separate use. So it's a lot more of an open end to having different uses on one lot, let's say. The next slide is just to give you a sense of the difference. So Euclidean zoning is, your standard typical zoning, where there's a segregation of uses, versus with form-based code, it looks very much to the relationship of what would happen on a lot to its surrounding lots, to the interests of the neighborhood. Although, as I mentioned, you have your code that does allow for mixed use, a form-based code really illustrates and pinpoints what that type of mixed use should be. So it's very in line with the scenario work that's been done. It's a bit more flexible, and like I said, it's an easier process because typically this type of code, so these uses that are put into the code are allowed by right because there has been forward thinking in terms of what those uses mean instead of, sort of being responsive. So those are the basic differences. Next slide will say, I've started to sort of already get into this in terms of why is this considered. Again, I think, and I'm by no means suggesting that the code that you have isn't a good one. It's just that it's textural based versus visually based. So that's an actual another important factor. I know it may sound sort of elementary, but it's not, because when you try to write something in language without having an example or even a drawing that really shows what exactly you mean by when you're saying, building scale of this type, that's the building scale that you need to illustrate to a proponent, and that's what the code allows you to do. It doesn't replace your negotiating process in talking with a developer. I mean, obviously, we all, as planners, would purport having these conversations initially before you have something before you, but it gives a lot more information essentially to the boards in terms of what it is that you're looking for, and then developers can see that. So the next slide, again, going back to why do we want to use this, and this is again showing you that initial look at these properties. There's a lot of restriction right now in terms of setback lines, impervious surface coverage, that then makes the form of the development difficult. Even when we did the scenario planning, we started to realize, oh boy, can we really place a building on this spot? Or does it have to be, this far from the road or from the back or whatnot? So there's very limits, there's lots of limitations. Going to the next, again, showing what we showed in the beginning. This is the type of thing that can be very easily done using form-based code because you are already describing and prescribing these types of flexible dimensional allowances. Next slide. I think to really understand what it is that's different is that it's just a particular type of article or a code that you can either incorporate it into your zoning code as part of it, or you can have it be sort of a standalone ordinance. I think it's just, that's more of an administrative question and how the town wants to handle that. But a form-based code is actually written up as a code so that there's information with respect to purpose and authority and your standard information that needs to be placed in law. And the next element is I think one of the keys. This isn't actually one of the better viewings, and I had neglected to tell Maren that I have handouts that have some other visuals. The regulating plan, they call it, is really actually I think a pretty neat element because it's where you can take your neighborhood scale and really show the type of uses that you're interested in. Now this one is breaking it up a lot between a parcel here that has office and a parcel that is more residential. That's not what we're suggesting. We're suggesting mixed use. But this is a larger area. If you were to do an even larger district than Littleton Common, there's ways that you can literally map the types of uses that you're interested in. So, but in the handout example, there's actually one that's more local that shows you how, on a street-by-street basis, you can show, green spaces, streetscapes improvements, sort of the larger illustration of what you're looking for. And a lot of that is work that we've already done. When we've gone through and done the scenarios, we've done GIS mapping and spatial analysis, so that's something that's easy to portray. And the next slide is, and actually, can I back up for just a moment? The regulating plan, again, can be done different ways, and one of the ways that I've seen also is it's interesting. It's far more of a real zoom into certain, street sections or parcels where you want to show. In this area, it'd be really great if we had a pocket park or something of that nature. Again, it's not to say you have to have that there, but to show the type of sustainable development you're interested in. So the next and last component is where you set regulations. So this is the key. This is where you can get design guidelines on your building form, the site plan layout, all the flexible elements that you want can be put into the regulating guide. It's a guidance document that is, brought into law by the code itself, but it's as your other regulations that you have for. I'm not sure if you have your own stormwater, for example, but it's providing the developer, the proponent, and the town with guidance as to what you're really looking for streetscapes, open space, everything that all ties together. And that is actually what I'm showing here, a section of code, of the regulations that one puts together for this type of code. It's very illustrative. There's a lot of examples. There's pictures. It's very informative. And I think that's the real key here. So you get a lot of bang for your buck when you put something like this together. And that's it. I just, wanted to put this before you. I think I would say that all members of our team are very interested in doing this because we really do feel that it is the best approach for this type of area, for a common that is as unique but also historic and a village type of setting. But really what it came down to was when we heard a lot of the interests in terms of how you can ensure community feel, the characteristics of the town, the walkability that folks are interested in, and the greening of the common itself, this is really the way to do it, that you can incorporate all of those elements together. So that's it for me.
Does the board have any questions?
First of all, thank you for your presentation. It's helpful. I hope that the town and I hope that the board will embrace form-based code. For me, it's all about look, touch, feel, the whole sensation of a downtown that, is something that our residents want, and they want to be able to enjoy it and make it a vibrant community. And if we can get that through this type of zoning, I think it's beneficial. I think that walkability is key. A lot of studies are saying, and hopefully the studies are right, that eventually we'll see less traffic, we'll see less people owning their own personal vehicles, we'll see more pedestrian, biking, accessing areas like that. So I just don't know how. However we push it forward, you let me know, and I'll support it. So.
Good.
Julie, thanks for coming out again. I have a question. Do you happen to have any of the photos, or maybe Maren, you do, in terms of the side-by-side photo that illustrates what a traditional Euclidean coding building would look like versus form-based coding?
We do.
That might be helpful to show folks.
Sure. Well, one, as an example, is in, I think, the second page of the handout where it shows the difference between a lot, or a series of lots, a large lot, let's say, that you have what one lot's changes could be under conventional zoning or Euclidean zoning and versus the form-based. We have more of those illustrations that we can definitely provide. I think that what the team would want to do is actually take real representative photos of areas now and really essentially overlay that with kind of what we've shown you before with those parcels of what that type of the difference between what you get with your current zoning and your form base. That is something that is part of the work that would be done, but we can certainly provide more illustration of that.
Okay. This is the one that I was thinking about, that I think you had provided previously.
Oh, yes, yeah, that's true, yep.
So that provides a pretty clear picture. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
something that we could bring up, but, okay. I think for me, that's one of the big things is if, and I'm happy to pass this around, but the photos that are used to illustrate the difference between typical zoning versus form-based coding is pretty significant in terms of the level of detail that you get. So I think that's something that folks here in town really resonated with everybody, I think, the idea of wanting that level of detail. So that's what this would provide.
Okay. It reminds me of when we did the overlay district. We went back and forth about how we wanted the feel of the town as we did the overlay district, and we wanted to keep the colonial character of it. We talked about architectural control, having architectural review as we did the projects. We never quite went that way. We kept it that it would be done mostly in-house, the planning board, the developer. And then we look at the point, and the point is, I guess that's probably your closest, what you're talking about, the form-based coding, is how the point came out, I would say, if I was to guess how. There's a look and a feel, and it's follow through, and it's a theme to the whole thing, so,
It'd be even
more
different
detail.
than, yeah, because of the density of where the common is, a lot more activity at the street level, and, you know, that, all that layers of parking can go behind, so, but you're right, that plan of an area.
Yeah, I think the difference is, if we remember, we had probably 12 special permits stacked on each other for all the approvals that had to be done.
Right.
And it was very reactionary. Sam would propose something and he worked very well with the town on what he would like, and it worked very well in the one spot. But this is doing the public input and the board input beforehand, saying this is what we would like to see, and then the developers can respond to that.
Well, my point is, it was a theme, and it would extend to the whole common, and it's the same kind of theme, so.
Yeah, just done in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it takes most of the homework out of it, is what it does, so. I don't know, I guess, we've started down this road, we might as well see where it takes us, right? Anyone in the audience have any questions?
On behalf of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, we talked about this. We did not give this in-depth a presentation on form-based code yet, so it's very good to see it tonight, and I'm sure we will be reviewing this at our next meetings. The things, but we did talk about it, and we did some research, online and things like that. And, from our perspective, it's something that we definitely want to evaluate and see how well it fits into what we're trying to do with the common revitalization. It will require some extra spending beyond the contract that we had negotiated with 4 Point for the current level of work that they're doing, and that's why we're presenting it here and trying to, there's money earmarked on an article at town meeting on the 29th, October 29th, and we are hopeful that we will get that money approved to spend so that we can continue to pursue and evaluate this. Nothing has been decided, nothing's set in stone, but, I think what we see here is, and to your point, Mark, it gives you a consistency of execution so that it's not hit or miss, and it's not, one part came out really well, the other, not so much. You get a consistency of execution across the entire area, but I think it also, what it does is it allows that upfront piece of it where we're doing it as a community before we start breaking ground, before we even get a developer at the table. We're making our determinations as a community what we want for look and feel, whether it's colonial or neo-colonial, or I'm not an architect, I can't say any more terms than I've got right there. But once we've determined it, then we can be confident that it's going to look like that when all is said and done. Whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, it will happen because it's in the code. And the developers come to the table understanding that. If they think they can do that, great, they want to play in the sandbox, wonderful. If they're like, no, I can't do that, you've seen my work, we don't do that kind of stuff, we're, straight corners, boom, done, out the door we go, then don't even come in and talk to us, because that's not what we're looking for. And I think there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm from the community for this type of project, but there's also apprehension. What exactly are you talking about? And, we try to say all the right things, we try to use visuals, but when we get this particular effort done, if we go down this road, we will be able to show very distinctly to the community from their input, this is what we're talking about. Is this what you agree on? Yes, we voted into the code, boom. Now the developers have to come in and execute on our vision. We're dictating the terms to a much larger degree and controlling the outcome than if we did a typical zoning where we say, okay, yeah, we're going to ease the parking restrictions, the setbacks, things like that. We want to work with you, and we're going to tell you what we want, but at the end of the day, they're going to do as much or as little as they think they can get away with, right? Now we have a lot more control. So from the MPIC perspective, we would very much like to have the support of the planning board to get the money to spend to keep going down the road. A lot of work to be done, a lot of determinations to get made, both by the boards appointed or elected, but also by the community. There'll be plenty of opportunity for more input from them to give us the feedback, yes, we like that, no, not so much.
But isn't that a double-edged sword as well? We want developers to develop their properties in the common. It's going to be entirely an economic decision. If it makes sense, they're going to develop. If it makes sense to do mixed use, that's what they're going to do. If you put more constraints and more guidelines and tell them exactly what they can do, then you're going to get less people buying into the process.
True, no doubt, but then that's where the balance is, right? Where do you strike that balance, where you don't want to necessarily have every Tom, Dick, and Harry ready to rock and roll on the town common and do what they want to do, versus so restrictive, we can't get anybody to come to the table at all. And, that's why, getting input from the community, terrific. Sometimes they're not have as much context or experience as someone who's been on these types of boards for longer. That's what we're here to do, right, is work with the community to strike that balance so that we make sure that it's worthwhile. I mean, we could tell them, build the Taj Mahal. Well, great idea, but it's never going to get done, right? Nobody's going to build a Taj Mahal in downtown Littleton. They're building it out a little farther out.
You mean Groton?
Yeah. But, I agree, it's a great point. That's why we need to work the process, and in order to do that with, consultants that have experience in it, it's going to take a little bit more cash.
Okay, anyone in the audience have any other questions before we move on? Yes, in the back, please. Name for Myron.
Just one question I've never heard of.
Could we have your name?
Oh, Jennifer Manicum, 11 Cricket Lane. It seems great, and I just learned about it right recently, and I know that you promote it. What would be the traditional argument against it? Is there like a standard argument that would say, oh, we wouldn't want to?
I would say some of the things that have been raised here, there's some perception that it's over-prescriptive, but from our perspective, from a planning perspective, that's not generally the case. I think that idea has come from looking at something, looking at that very detailed, use and guidance in terms of type of mixed use, but not going through. But that the comments have not been by folks who have gone through that process and understanding that it actually is pretty flexible. Just because you're putting something down in regulation in terms of, oh, we'd like to see this building guideline for this type of use, there's still the process of going, before the board. There's questions that can be raised by the community. And in addition to that, the benefit has been discussed, whereas having all of this information set in advance already includes the community. So the community can say, this is exactly what we want to see. Yes, it might be a risk because we may not get a developer who wants to do something innovative and sustainable, but do you want that developer here anyway?
And in my experience, I found that in some cases it actually allows them to be more creative. You're actually opening up a box of opportunity where you get a mixed-use building and they get to use new innovative ideas, new innovative, techniques, materials. And when you allow somebody to be creative, I think you get a better project. And I don't know too many people, whether it's a developer, an architect, an engineer, that don't want to be challenged. I think they embrace it, so. You know, you get the quick hits who want to just make the money, but I don't think that's what you're gonna see in the Commonwealth. And I don't think this board would allow it.
Just one more point I'd like to make too. We're talking about the buildings, but the point being in the streetscape and open space is a big part of the form-based code too. So when we think about it as a community, it's not simply what the building's gonna look like, it's what the area is gonna look like. And I think, again, having the ability as a community to determine the parameters for that up front can assuage a lot of the concern or apprehension about, well, we know it could be good, but is it gonna be? Yeah, this creates a much higher probability that this is gonna look about like what we had as a community envisioned than if we went with a more open-ended, where we're relying on, you know, a particular planning board and the members of the board and the members of the other boards to work with the developer. As time passes, you're not gonna get that consistency of execution. It's just not gonna happen. It's much more difficult, right? A much lower probability. Whereas if we can do this work now, you can always tweak it, you can always revisit it, but I think you'll have a much better chance for a standard of execution across the board. And again, emphasizing not just the building, but the whole area, the streetscape and the open space.
Does anyone want to make a motion to support this article for town meeting?
I'll make the motion to support the article and request for funds at town meeting to continue the form-based code study. So what are we calling it? Form-based code.
That covered most of it,
Yep.
yes.
Second, please.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3 out of 4.
Opposed, abstained? What do we got?
I'll abstain.
3 out of 4. Okay. Thank you very much, by the way.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Fontanella.
Yes, my apologies again for not coordinating on the,
All right, we're running a little bit late. It was 7 o'clock public hearing on our zoning amendment bylaws. We have senior residential and accessory apartment zoning bylaw.
Yep, and there are copies available in the back. The pink is the existing accessory apartment, and the white next to it is the proposed changes. The blue is the existing senior residential development bylaw, and the white is, next to that is the changes. People are looking for more copies.
Public hearing zoning bylaw amendments. The Town of Littleton Planning Board will hold public hearings on Thursday, September 20th, 2018, starting at 7 p.m. in the community meeting room of the Littleton Fire Department, 20 Foster Street, Littleton, to consider amendments to the zoning bylaw according to MGL Chapter 40A, Section 5. There are 2 proposed zoning bylaw amendments to be considered. 1, senior residential development zoning bylaw proposal to amend the current senior residential development bylaw to update requirements regarding unit affordability, development location, on-site amenities, unit design, mix of unit types, and/or open space requirements. Accessory apartment zoning bylaw proposal to amend the current accessory apartment bylaw to better meet the needs of Littleton residents by allowing in-law type apartments and accessory apartments by right and detached accessory apartments by special permit, and to clarify certain sections of the bylaw.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got a list of change or potential changes that we'd like. We'll start with the senior residential. We've talked about these, I thought about these because having passed the bylaw in the spring, we've now had a chance to kind of get a feel for the bylaw and maybe some, I guess if you think in phone terms, some bugs we need to straighten out in it.
Makes sense?
So, before us, we have a couple. How do you want to handle it? Do you want to go line by line and talk about each potential change? That make the most sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is by amending 173-145 to read the follow. The purpose of this article is to provide for a variety of housing types, sizes, setting, residential services, and price points to meet the needs of the people as they age and people with disabilities. So we want to change that.
Well, and may I just add a comment on that?
Sure.
So the primary change on this particular item is around sizes and price points. And I think that's because we wanted to make sure that as we move forward, that we do in fact receive applications that have a variety of housing sizes and a variety of price points, because we are still trying to focus on meeting the needs of Littleton seniors. That is a priority for us, for me, excuse me, and making sure that, that we have that variety.
And one of the reasons we did this in the first place was to make sure that we could put different products out there that would appeal to the seniors in Littleton, and affordability is, I think, the key component. And this is giving us a little bit more tools to try to get more affordable and market rate and below market rate units for the seniors in town. So,
Well, if you go on that line when you say size of variety of products and affordability, and you turn around and try and make some of them affordable, you have to have the affordable ones look exactly like the non-affordable ones per se.
I agree.
So with that being said, you're going to have somebody build 30 buildings, and 10 of them are going to be the high end, 10 will be the middle, and some will be low, and then you'll take one out of each, and somebody's going to get a lower looking valued house because.
Well, they have to all look the same. There's no,
Well, then how do you come up with size, variety, products, and affordability if they all look the same?
the
What you put
exterior,
inside?
it's what you put inside that makes the difference, but on the outside, they all have to be, you can't put,
I don't think we're getting to the, we're not going in the right direction if that's what we're talking about. I think when we talk about variety, we're talking about a variety of different structures on one side.
Right, we're talking about
So
that, but Peter's
You can do
trying-
size, you can do different sizes at different price points. Certainly if you build 800 square feet, 1,200 square feet, 1,600 square feet, that's 3 different price points, right?
Right.
So I think that's how we achieve affordability, is through sizing.
I agree with that, but again, when you turn around, you have to make X amount of affordable houses make them affordable, they have to be kind and like,
well,
correct?
Correct.
but the way
Yeah,
our,
but they could still be a mixed use of sizes, and then in those mixed use of sizes, as long as it all equals out to that they're all going to be affordable.
but the way our affordability is now, they have to look the same. You can't put vinyl siding on the affordable units and then put cedar clapboards on the regular type. They all have to look the same. So when you go to a neighborhood, you
But
can't.
they only have to look the same on the exterior.
Exterior, correct. That's what we're talking about. And size will make a difference, and types. Whether we go with townhouses, whether we go with duplexes, whether we go with single-family homes, different types as we put the project.
Well, the affordability part of it's going to have to be part of this.
Right.
It's going to determine exactly what is affordable and what is not, what they look like, what goes into them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we haven't, that's the first one. Next one is, by amending 173-146 by adding a new subsection 4.3 as follows. Sites within such proximities to the village common district, the point, or the MBTA station, so that in the judgment of the planning board, one or more of these locations will serve to support senior health, mobility, independence, and the participation in the community. So that one's trying to give us more units located where the seniors can walk. The seniors don't have to rely on transportation. Readily available, a coffee shop is close by. Not all of them have to be that way, but our point is to get more of them more centrally located than out in the fringes of where,
So you put one on Foster Street, unless you build a grocery store and a coffee shop and a bread-making facility for within 300, 400, 500 yards? I mean, how far are the elderly going to walk?
well, they'll take the train to go to Acton and then
Or they'll take the
get
train
off
to go to the coffee shop and then just wait for it to come back.
and come back
to the
the other
station.
way.
That makes sense. All right. And where's the other two places? The center of town, sure, that makes the most
And
sense.
the point, or something towards, closer to the point.
what's left
Or
over
even
there.
in the point.
And the point as well.
Because if we go to form-based code and we go outside of the village common district, maybe at some point there could be mixed use in that area as well. Or we could, through this bylaw, we could obtain it.
It doesn't preclude them going other,
Right.
our preference, this is our preference, is that they be more centrally located than out in the, because Littleton really doesn't have a bus system or adequate means to get from,
You'd be surprised.
well, we have a shuttle system now, yes. but-
Yes.
All right.
You have a compact going.
Well, the whole point of citing within the proximity is the fact that through some of the other studies that we've had in town, like the Littleton Housing Production Plan, it speaks to making sure that seniors are located in a place where they have access to these particular supports.
Okay, so the next one is, by deleting from 173-148E the phrase, "not more than 25% of the required minimum open space," inserting in its place, "not more than 20% of the required minimum open space."
And if I may add, it needs to be continued, percent of the required minimum open space shall consist of wetlands. So the intention here was not to reduce the amount of open space, but rather the percentage of the wetlands on that open space.
I'm sorry, you repeat that, the beginning of that?
Sure.
So we're going for
Well,
20,
right, the end of the sentence stays the same, but it's not reflected in,
Yes, and it needs to be
Might you read-
reflected.
You can start all over.
technically, you're not changing that part of the.
Oh, okay. It's just confusing, I think,
So we're going from
to
20
audience members.
25% of the open space now can be wetlands.
Wetlands.
Can be wetlands.
We're reducing it down to 20%. This change, we're reducing from 25% to 20% of it can be wetlands.
So 10% or 5% behind dry, so.
Do we consider the entire project, if there's 10 acres and 3 acres are wet, do they get to build, in the conventional, say, one house every 10 acres? Do we include the 10 acres of wetlands or the 3 acres of wetlands in the grand scheme of the 10 houses?
No, because,
We don't, so, but we get to include it in open space if we do it.
well, not, if it's all wet, you can't. You could
Then
take
why do we accept wetlands as open space?
just 20% of the,
Of the wet, we can accept as open space.
right.
No, that's not how that says it.
It
It
says
says reducing from 25% to 20% can be wetlands.
of the total, so if there's 3 acres, 25% of it, let's do it, I'll make it easy. If there's 4 acres, 25% of that is 1 acre. See, I can do it. It's
Okay,
easier
we'll
that
do
way.
that.
25% of that is 1 acre can be wet. Under the new bylaw, if it's 4 acres, only 20% of that can be wet, and that'd be like 3/4 of an acre. So it reduces the amount of area that is wet in the 4 acres still. The 4 acres is still the 4 acres of open space. That hasn't changed. It's what's inside that 4 acres that changes.
That's how that reads.
That's how that reads.
All of the open space, only 20% can be wet.
Because it used to be 25%.
25%.
And is that 25, or the 20% inclusive of the entire area for availability for building?
No, it's inside the open space. It has nothing to do with,
Before it became open space. Take the whole 4 acres.
yep,
How many houses can you build on 4 acres?
4.
Okay, but 1 acre is wet. So how many houses can you build on the 4 acres now?
3.
And it stays at?
But the open, we're not talking about that.
Well, that's-
Not conventional.
We're not
It's an
talking
open
about
space.
conventional here right now. We're just talking about the open space. That's, has to go with the parcel as you develop a senior residential project. Okay? Anyone else? We're still good with this one? All right, next one. Don't worry, you guys will get to ask your questions in a minute. And then we add G to that 173-10. Okay, by amending 173-148 to add a new subsection G to read as follows. All senior residential developments shall include accessible common areas for seniors to congregate sidewalks, walking paths, trails, and/or other passive or active recreational opportunities and appropriate lighting, notwithstanding anything contained in 173-198 for any senior residential development, subject to article, I can't do hieroglyphics, what number is that? 29, 29?
Very good.
Oh, I did do that. Inclusionary housing at least 50% of the dwellings units shall be affordable housing ranging from 60% to 100% of the AMI, and the mix of affordable ranges of these units shall be at the discretion of the planning board. All other requirements of Article 29 shall remain fully applicable to senior residential development. Okay, so the first one, G, talks about some of the amenities at the very minimum we want to see on them. Dedicated walking trails, places for the seniors to congregate, to be able to interact with their friends or have their friends over and things like that. That's G. Anybody have any issues with, or any comments on G?
Nope.
Then we move to H. So that one talks about, now we're talking about price point. We're talking about market, the value we're going to place on the units if you decide to go to a senior residential project. So what this says that 50% of the units have to be either a percentage of the AMI or no more than 150%. So let me read it, let me go back to it. Okay, so 50% of the dwellings shall be affordable housing ranging from 60 to 150% of the AMI. So if the AMI is 187, so the first 50% of the units have to be 60% of that 187.
No, 187 is the approximate price point if you're at 80% AMI.
Oh, okay, 187, so 60% is a percentage below 187, and 150 would be 300 or whatever
Yeah.
that number works out to. So there's a price range now for the first 50% of the units, so that we have a number that we're trying to, like we said earlier, we're trying to make it so that the units are more affordable, and we have some sort of leverage to make. If you're going to go down this bylaw, this is how we want affordability in the projects. And then the other 50% would be at a market rate that the developer and the planning board agreed to, and would be subject to that. And size-wise, the bylaw would still regulate the size of it and things like that, but we would allow the market to dictate what those 50% would be. Do you guys have any questions?
Peter has to go, he's a Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
Be back if I get a chance.
Do you have a,
So, with the 50%, I mean, listen, if we can get it, that's great, you know, I just don't know that we're gonna get a developer that's gonna come in with the numbers that we're proposing now. Anna and I, along with Martin, had a working session, and the numbers that we came up with in our working session to try to redefine a lot of the items in the bylaw, we went with 25 with that same sliding scale instead of 50, because originally it was 10. In negotiations with two of the proposals that came before us originally, under the original bylaw, we were able to negotiate at certain points up to 20% from them, although everything's changed since then because of feedback we've gotten. We felt like if we could push them to 20, we could definitely push them to 25, making 10% at 80, which meets the state requirement, and anything after that, we could put a Littleton preference on, and we could use that same sliding scale from 60 to 150. So I felt like at the 25, we had room. I wouldn't be opposed to using the 50 if we could get a developer to partner with the town and do an actual garden style. So that would work in a high density, large volume project. But I think when we're talking about 17 units, 19 units, even up to 20, 30 units, that scale is going to kill the proposal.
but it's our discretion, and if we don't have it in there, then there's no way we can.
So you're saying that we could waive the 50 and go to 25?
We could, it's a special,
No, it's there. It's not something you can waive. It exists.
You can only waive it if you write into the bylaw that you can waive it.
It's at the planning board's discretion. The other reason why I asked for it to be at 50 is that if we go to town meeting, it's going to be hard to go from 25 to 50 if we wanted to go up. We
So
could go-
if you want to put the 50 in, and then we can say that at the discretion of the planning board to waive the requirement.
Waive to, back to 25%?
If we have to put a number on it, then,
I would recommend
Okay.
a target.
Well, in this case, it actually says at least 50%, so aren't we really saying at most 50%?
Well, we're at least 50%, yeah,
at most 50%,
at most.
at least 25%.
But, okay, so where does this sit with the inclusionary? Because right now, we have nothing. The only thing catching this whole bylaw is the 10% at the inclusionary. So this is on top of the inclusionary, actually, is what it really is. 10% is the inclusionary. There's nothing in the senior residential bylaw that they have to be affordable. Wow. So that's,
Coming for you.
I guess, yeah. So that's why, like I said, after talking to town council, I put a higher number in so that we can negotiate it or talk about it at town meeting.
Okay, so if we go with that 50%, again, as long as we put the amendment in, that we can waive the requirement down to.
Or we can negotiate it. That we can negotiate down to 35 if it's a project that makes sense.
Then it would have to say, at the most 50%, and it can be negotiated anywhere between 50 down to 25.
How would we write it?
If you send me off to go draft that amendment, I can do that.
Okay.
I guess the only caution I'd add is that if you're setting the 50 as the ceiling, and you're leaving yourself room to negotiate down, I think as a practical matter, you're only gonna get one or two cracks at that. If you say 50, but the first applicant through the door, you round it down to 30, it may be difficult to hold the next applicant after that, which is 45, 50, or even higher than you've done the first time round. So that's just a word of caution, that you're gonna set the practical.
Once you set precedent, yeah.
Once you do it the first time.
It's good advice, and when we look at it that way, like I said, each and every individual senior residential proposal needs to stand on its own merit, so even if we set one at 30 and one at 50, I would be okay with the,
Okay, so you can clean it up for us. Next. By amending 173-152, so this subsection code reads as follows. The senior residential development is consistent with the goals and intention of the Littleton Master Plan.
Correct. So one of the questions that came up through feedback was whether we could be a little bit more precise about what intentions actually means. And so I think that, and this is something we could provide town council if needed in terms of what information we have that alludes to that. But there is, in one of the documents that's posted out there on the board, there is relevant information about that comes from the master plan, identifying what the intention is for senior housing. So there is plenty of information related to that.
Okay. I think that's,
Yes.
I didn't hear what the final thing was.
folks, just for tonight, because we're in a different location, if you do want to speak, you do have to come up to the microphone so that you can be heard on television, okay?
it is, what was your question again, ma'am? I forgot.
Mary Hunt, I was just questioning what was decided on that H,
H?
that you're discussing, the 35, 50%.
So we're going to leave it at 50%, and the gentleman in front of you is going to keep us out of trouble and word it properly so that we can, it'll be at the planning board discretion as to what range of affordability will be, but no more than 50, and no less than 25.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so are we good up here with where we're at and want to open it up to public discussion?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions about any of the proposed changes? Again, raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you and your name for Maren so she can get it on the record, please.
You can go to a microphone.
Oh, and you have to, yeah, you need to either stand up or anybody,
You have to come to a microphone, that's all.
anyone wants to speak. Or do you want to take your 10 minutes at town meeting and discuss it there? Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Manicum, Cricket Lane. I have a question about whether they'll, what the definition of seniors might actually be, whether we're, I know that in the plan, these aren't age restricted, and I know that there was some talk, at one point, someone had brought up the idea of housing for empty nesters, which has it's a different demographic that may still have housing needs, but isn't really consistent with the needs that we're talking about here. So I'm just wondering if there'll be any sort of further fleshing out of who the demographic is that this bylaw is really looking to serve?
Well, we've always talked about over 55. The intention is that for the people over 50, the Littleton residents over 55 to hopefully age in place, meaning there's different sorts of senior housing that will be available. And we've used 55. Now, the reason we didn't want to age restrict it, and we could still age restrict it as a part of the special permit if we want to, correct?
I believe we can. I think the issue is that we do that, we lose the count to our affordable units to prevent 40B coming in. We want to keep it above 10%, so.
You lose that, you lose any person who's disabled, who's not 55 yet, exclude them, and
Well, the thought was we could include,
A lot of times, it goes against the Fair Housing Act is what happens. Once you age restrict it, you're basically flouting the law, and at that point, we gain nothing from it other than an age-restricted development. We certainly, it's supposed to be, age-restricted by design, so the whole idea of the, zero entry level, zero entrance, the 36-inch doorways, all that thing, of course it would be convenient for all of us, but the idea is that, the small size is really what gets you the senior. It's age-restricted by design, that's the goal. It doesn't mean it's always going to go to a 55 or older person, but that's what we're encouraging, and that's the reason for it. So.
and there was talk about still age restricting it as we go through the special permit process, knowing full well that if we do age restrict it, that it's not going to count on our tally to keep us under the 10% threshold for, to keep 40Bs out. So, but we do know, and that is something that we have spoke about at our previous meetings. Anyone else have any questions? Or you have to raise your hand before you get up. All right.
Roger Kennard. I was just wondering how these new regulations are going to cloud or affect the two senior housing developments that are in front of you already.
I don't think they don't have any precedent on what you guys have already proposed. You have standing with the original approved senior residential development bylaw, so I don't see how that we could affect anything other than what we've negotiated so far. So.
All right, thank you.
Right, they're through the process, they're still grandfathered because they were before any changes or any.
I don't want to complicate that. The filing of a special permit application by itself does not grandfather the property against a zoning change. If you hold a special permit, if you've been issued it and it's become final, that special permit is grandfathered. But a pending special permit application is not grandfathered against a zoning change.
Thank you. I was
But
misinformed. Appreciate it.
the preliminary, on one of them, there is a preliminary subdivision that has been filed, So that.
That'll do it.
That froze grandfathering on that one.
What about if we denied it? What does that do to it?
If he follows 8 months from now with a definitive subdivision, he would still be grandfathered.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Right. Yeah, no, if there's a subdivision plan recently approved or in process in any way, there's a freeze in place that will, that'll do it. That'll earn them the freeze against this new zoning change.
Okay. Anyone else? You have a question? Okay. Yes.
Question?
No, he's just
Yep.
half asleep.
There were a couple of questions that came online, and I just wanted to make sure that we addressed them. One question is, should paragraph 4G, which talks about the development shall include accessible common areas,
Walking path, trails.
yes, should that state that all accessible common areas are required to be ADA compliant? Is that something that we should specify in here?
Pretty sure
So
they
for the
have
state
to
of
be.
Massachusetts, the requirement is the Architectural Access Board.
So it's already a given.
It is a given, it's a
Okay.
requirement.
Okay.
It's
All right.
AAB.
Okay. And the others were answered.
Okay.
So, real quick before we close this, is there anything that we need to do for the inclusionary piece of it, or we're good with 4H in terms of the affordability piece?
Yeah. I noticed one thing as I was getting ready for tonight that I hadn't noticed earlier, and that is that the inclusionary zoning bylaw has a density incentive. So if you provide more than the 10%, you can then, more affordable units than the 10% required, you can earn an additional number of market rate units. I think as H is drafted, it's pretty much clear enough that you don't, if you provide more than 10%, you're not going to earn the density bonus because we're requiring 50 or between 25 and 50. But it wouldn't hurt, I don't think, for me to add one additional sentence under section H, just to make absolutely clear that by providing more than the 10% under the inclusionary zoning bylaw, they're not earning a density bonus for providing between 25 and 50.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. Great.
All right. Okay, so we're good with this one. So to bring it to town meeting, do we want to do the next one? Do it that way?
Do we vote on it now or
We should
later?
probably vote on it now.
Chris, is there any problem with them
Or-
voting on the recommendation to town meeting pending updated wording?
Nope. They can just instruct me to vote to approve it with the changes discussed tonight.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the,
Recommend to town meeting?
recommend to town meeting these changes,
So-
subject to Chris's
Second.
invite. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's that one. The next one is accessory apartment one. Okay. Okay, planning board zoning amendment, article apartments, two-thirds vote required. See if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws as follows. By deleting the definition of accessory apartment set forth in Article 2, definition section 173, that's 2 in its entirety. That's the first one. Do we want to talk about that one first? Or you want to go down the whole list and go through them?
Go one by one.
Okay, so that's one. So,
So you're deleting the one category of accessory apartments and adding 3 other categories.
okay. No, okay. So number 2 is by by amending the definition of dwelling, single-family as set forth in Article 2, definition, section 173, to read the following. Dwelling, single-family, dwelling other than a mobile home, single and apart from any other building, used exclusively for residential purposes for one family, except as permitted pursuant to the Article, come on,
No,
13, accessory dwelling units. That's 2. And by Number 3 is by inserting Article 2, definition 173-2, the following definition is appropriate alphabetical order. Oh, we should probably do that one afterwards. So let's talk about the first one first. So they're defining what a single-family dwelling is. So do we have a problem with that?
Nope.
Okay. So the next one, accessory dwelling unit. The following dwelling units are classified as accessory dwelling units. A, accessory accessory dependent dwelling units. An interior dwelling unit that is occupied one or more persons related by blood or marriage or adoption to the occupants of the primary single-family dwelling unit. 2, functionally dependent for medical or other reasons on the occupant of the primary single-family dwelling unit. Or 3, upon whom the resident of the primary single-family dwelling unit is functionally dependent for medical or other reasons. Okay. So that's what the determination of an accessory dwelling, an interior accessory dwelling unit is going to be. Do you have any issues with that?
So the only thing I was thinking about is when, number 1, related by blood, marriage, or adoption to the occupant, with today's diverse families, I think that limits a lot of other opportunity to care for someone who you would consider a family member.
But doesn't that get caught in the next ones whether it's for medical or other reasons?
Functionally dependent for medical or other reasons on the occupant? Well, so that captures a home health aide or
Right.
for others, but I just don't want to limit it, say, you're not a trained professional, but yet you're going to care for somebody who you would consider family, but they're not related by blood, marriage, or adoption. I just don't want to exclude, I want to make sure that this includes everybody, that there's no way, I have friends that I consider family, and that if they were ever in need and I was able to provide for them in my home by installing an accessory apartment, I would want to be allowed to do that because they are somebody that I care and love, I don't want to see that this limits that. I'm not a trained professional, but I'd certainly do my best.
Doesn't it,
So when we get to the definition of functionally dependent, we try to write that quite broadly. Does that cover your question or not?
That's at the bottom.
there, the last one.
There it is.
Below C, functionally dependent.
And it goes on to say on the next page.
So the only real difference actually between this one and B is if you wanted to have your friend live in your apartment, you build an apartment, you have to put a wall between them.
Well, no, I think if you go down to the definition that was written for functionally dependent, it covers it.
Well, you can,
I just want to show you how loving and caring I was, that's all.
A kind heart.
that's a kind of gentler ed. Okay, so that one's okay. So now we go to accessory apartment. An interior dwelling unit provided with permanent fire-rated separations, 2 separate means of egress, and a Title V compliant septic system. So that would catch if you wanted to just have a friend in there.
Right.
The difference between the first one and the second one is the fact that you don't have to make it compliant, I
Right.
guess is the difference.
In the first one that we're talking about, as opposed to second, that one gets the 3-year look back by the inspectional services, right, by the building department. So the accessory apartment by right, that one, once it's created, it exists, and at that point, as long as they meet Title V and the fire separation, there's no look back on that one, correct?
As it's currently drafted, there's a 3-year look back at all 3 types of accessory dwelling units.
Right, and I'm
I've
aware
heard
that.
comments that maybe we don't need to do that.
Right,
We
and
only
that's where I was
need to
going.
Keep it on the first one.
Yes, so we definitely want to apply it to the first one. Accessory apartments, I think at that point, if we made it a look back for all 3, I think that we have already overtaxed building department with inspections and everything else that they need to do with zoning enforcement, that if we're asking them to do a 3-year look back on everything that gets approved under this bylaw, we're putting a demand on them that would require additional staff. My thought is that if we put the accessory dependent dwelling unit with the 3-year look back, but the accessory apartment by right, B, it works. Now, the detached accessory apartment, I'm up for debate on it, I can argue that, but I definitely think the accessory apartment, and Mara, I know you and I had a short conversation, I certainly want you to get your opinion out there. So.
Yeah, thank you. One of the concerns that we've heard from some residents is property owners who are not present. The look back is to see that the property owner resides in either the main unit or the
Right.
accessory dwelling unit.
So zoning complaint, this could fall under a zoning complaint, and once a zoning complaint is filed, as long as it's in written form, that would allow the building department to go out. That way, they're not checking every single one every 3 years. I think once a zoning complaint's filed, they can go out and then, ascertain whether both units are occupied by renters or one, so.
Yeah,
I think it's as simple as checking the mailboxes. When I was doing zoning enforcement in Newton, we dealt with this all the time, so.
Right. And the compliance check is a letter, the current process anyway, is a letter goes from the building department to the property owner, and are you still a resident of one of these units?
I think it's a step that we don't need to take. I'd wait for a zoning complaint to come in for, hey, you know what, the owner moved out, we know that they're not there, and now we can come, the neighbors that are concerned are gonna be aware, and if it becomes a party house, they can make the certain complaints, so.
All right, so moving on to C. A separate accessory dwelling unit attached to the primary single-family dwelling. So that's pretty straightforward. If it's an apartment inside, on top of a garage or detached.
Right. If I remember, the detached accessory apartment, that's a special permit to the ZBA, correct? They have to apply, I mean, they all are, but you have to go.
All right, so we're good with that one? Functionally dependent. With respect to a person shall mean an individual who is dependent upon another one for assistance relative to at least one activity daily, such as bathing, dressing, eating, mobility, or any other self-care tasks, who is dependent upon another for assistance relative to the instrumental activities of daily living, such as managing money, shopping, taking medication, house cleaning, laundry, or cooking, or who is providing child care and au pair service. So that's what we're trying to define what functionally dependent means. Everybody good with that? Interior dwelling unit, a secondary dwelling unit that is within it or created as an addition to a primary single-family dwelling. Okay, that's what that definition is. By deleting, number 4, by deleting from the table of uses set forth in Article 5, Use Regulations, Section 173-26B, accessory use, the use accessory apartment, see Article 13, and corresponding footnote 11. So, what the heck is that?
So you delete the one line of accessory apartments, and then next step you add the 3 different types of accessory
So that would be in the
apartments.
view set schedule in 5. Okay? So we're all good with that?
Yep.
Okay. We get rid of
You want to read footnote 11, just so we're aware, and people can hear it?
footnote 11 is provided that accessory dwelling units may be allowed in industrial A or industrial B districts by special permit from the zoning board of appeals where such uses are made in connection with a lawfully pre-existing single-family dwelling. Okay. Number 6, by deleting Article 13 accessory apartments in its entirety and inserting in place, therefore, a new Article 13 accessory dwelling unit to read the following. Article 13, accessory dwelling, 173-158, accessory dependent dwelling units. Accessory dependent dwelling units shall be allowed as set forth in 173-26B, providing that the square footage of the accessory dependent dwelling unit shall not exceed 1,200 square feet. The Board of Health determines that the sewage disposal will be satisfactorily provided for, including provisions for an appropriate reserve area on the site. C, the site, there shall be no more than one accessory dwelling unit per lot. The accessory dependent dwelling unit shall be designated to maintain the appearance of a single-family dwelling unit subject to the following requirements. Where two or more entrances exist on the front facade of the single-family dwelling unit, one entrance shall appear as the principal entrance, the other shall appear as a secondary. A minimum of 2 parking spaces provided for the primary dwelling and 2 additional parking spaces provided for the accessory dwelling unit, unless a lesser requirement is deemed adequate by the Board of Appeals. Parking spaces shall be constructed of materials consistent with existing driveways and shall have the vehicular access to the driveways. Do you want to keep going, or you want to stop there for those?
I think that's good.
Okay.
I have no issue with what's drafted.
No, I'm good.
All right. Where the driveway is located within 15 feet of the side lot line, at least 4 feet of the driveway side yard measurement from the side lot line shall be a buffer zone landscape with non-invasive plantings. Number F, a certificate of occupancy for the accessory use described above shall be issued for a period no greater than 3 years or at the change of ownership. Renewal of certificate of occupancy shall be granted only upon the documentation to the building inspector that the requirements of this section are still in existence, and, we stop at an and?
No, so before we continue, that's where I want to make sure it doesn't say the accessory use. I want to say the dependent dwelling, right? Okay.
Okay. So we're good with all of that? Dimensional criteria?
Mhm.
Okay, 173-59, accessory apartments. Accessory apartments
So
shall
this
be...
is the second of the third.
This is the second of the third, correct. Accessory apartments shall be allowed as set forth in 173-26B, provided that the primary single-family dwelling or the detached accessory apartment is owner-occupied. B, what?
Did we just,
What?
accessory apartment?
What about it?
Sorry, no, keep going, I'm sorry.
The square footage of the accessory apartment shall not exceed the lesser of the dimensional limitations as set forth, or 1,200 square feet. C, the Board of Health determines that the sewage disposal will be satisfactorily provided for, including provisions for an appropriate reserve area on site. D, there shall be no more than one accessory dwelling per lot.
And we need to take the detached one.
Right. I was going to say the same question.
The accessory apartment shall be designed to maintain the appearance of a single-family dwelling, subject to the following requirements. Any addition not increasing the gross floor area of the existing dwelling by more than 15%. Gross floor area for the purpose of this provision shall be calculated as a post-construction gross floor area to include all habitable space, including basement, first and second levels, and attached garage, excluding attic, decks, and porches. There shall be 2 separate means of egress from each accessory apartment and each primary residence as remote as possible from each other. Where 2 or more entrances exist on the front facade of the single-family dwelling, one entrance shall appear to be principal entrance and the other shall appear to be secondary. All access to the accessory apartment shall be the first floor. Above the floor shall be enclosed within an exterior wall in single-family dwellings or the rear of the dwelling constructed on an outer wall. A minimum of 2 parking spaces provided for the primary and 2 for the additional parking spaces for the accessory dwelling unit. Parking spaces shall be constructed of material consistent with the existing driveway and shall have vehicular access to the driveway. Accessory apartments shall have no more than 2 bedrooms. Okay, we're good with all of that.
Yep.
Where the driveway is located within 15 feet of the side lot, at least 4 feet of the driveway shall be measured. Measured from the side lot line shall be buffered. Landscape with non-invasive plantings. A certificate of occupancy for the accessory apartment shall be issued for the period no greater than 3 years with a change of ownership. Renewal of the certificate of occupancy shall be granted only upon determination by the building inspector that the requirements of this section still exist.
So that's when you don't want,
Yeah,
right?
so that's the one that gets, and instead of eliminating, maybe we can say a certificate of occupancy for the accessory apartment shall be issued for for as long as the, one of the two units is owner occupied. I think that makes sense. That way, when they go out and do a zoning enforcement, you've covered it in saying the only way that this can exist is one of the two units needs to be owner occupied. So that way, we don't eliminate G, we just changed it from the dependent dwelling definition to an accessory apartment definition, so it has its own standing.
I'm good with that. Detached accessory apartments. The zoning board of appeals may grant a special permit authorizing a detached accessory apartment as set forth in 173-26B only if the primary single-family dwelling or the detached accessory apartment is owner-occupied. The square footage of the detached structure, inclusive of all accessory uses on the lot, shall not exceed the dimensional limitations of 173-53, and the detached accessory apartment shall not exceed 1,200 square feet. There shall be no more than one accessory dwelling unit per lot. The minimum well, that's the parking thing again. I already did that one. The detached accessory apartment shall have no more than 2 bedrooms. The zoning board of appeals determines that the exterior appearance of the accessory structure is compatible with the principal single-family dwelling on the same lot and the dwelling and accessory structure on adjoining lots. And then we have the certificate of occupancy, 3 years, and then,
No, so that one again, right, it's part of the accessory, it's by right. So it should be, the detached accessory apartment shall, be issued a certificate of occupancy for as long as that one of the two units is occupied by the owner.
one of the owners. Board of Health determination about the sewer disposal. And thankfully, that's it. Any other issues? Chris, you're gonna make it look pretty for us?
I can make those changes.
Any questions from the board? Or did everyone go to sleep while I was doing that?
Make a motion to approve the amendments as discussed, and looking forward, recommend to town meeting. Yeah. That's what I meant.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, my God. Okay. We did. I'd like to, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for the zoning amendment bylaws for the warrant.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, good, we're out of that. So we're back on 8 o'clock, right? Okay. Do you want to do road acceptance for Foster Street? While we're, oh, that's right, we did it while we're waiting.
And you just did the 2, and you did the capital request, and the other.
Any other articles? We don't have any other articles, so everything for town meeting's done. Good, so we're back on 8 o'clock, we're a little late, half hour. Continue public hearing, The Point, Constitution Lab, modify sign bylaw standards.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, good to see you.
Thanks, Chris.
Chris, do I need to use a mic if I have a really loud voice?
No, it's for TV, so.
Oh, it is,
yeah.
okay, so let me sit over here. Great, thanks. I'm Gary.
How are you?
Hi, my name's Sam Park, I'm the owner of The Point. Actually, as of today, I'm the only owner of The Point since I bought out all my partners. Although I guess it's confidential, and I just announced it on TV, so that could be a problem.
Don't worry, guys.
I thought Tim mentioned that he had presented to you a signage package that sort of memorializes almost 7 years of working closely with the planning board, and suggested I just sort of come on, give an explanation, be able to answer some questions, and perhaps give a little history and overview. As Mark may know, I know Peter was in most of them, and some of your former planning board members painstakingly went through numerous meetings over the past 7 years, and so I thought if it was helpful, I could at least give a sort of a perspective of why some of this stuff was important to us, and what our goals are in sort of getting this amended package, or this updated package, as I like to call it. Almost a decade ago, the town, largely prompted by the planning board and the selectmen, passed a zoning code to attract something like our development to the town. It distinguishes our property in two ways. The overlay district, it's because we have so much land and every lot is a minimum of a certain amount of size, I think 6 acres, it kind of presents kind of a unique challenge for a lot of things. But the town vote, the town meeting that passed, basically empowered this board, the planning board, with the authority to make sure that the goals of the town meeting were adhered to and basically implemented, which was one, to attract a more vibrant, pedestrian-friendly, and I guess, Marion, you're the only other one that was here for all 7 years with me. And so in presenting this proposal and in developing the point, we worked pretty closely long before we even came forward with a proposal with the town, the selectmen, the planning board members, to kind of identify a project that everyone thought was attractive and fitting for the town. Now, so that said, I know our lawyers, the town's council, and crafted a very specific special permit that gave the planning board a little more flexibility. Primarily, one thing that maybe you aren't aware of is that because the planning board has sort of more authority to grant things that help encourage this mixed-use type development, that was very carefully crafted to allow a certain amount of flexibility and basically what has been built up there. And since then, we've invested $30, $40 million in getting the project built. We still have a little more going forward. Our goal, each step of the way, has always been to work primarily with the planning board, because they seem to have the best sense of what's good for the town, since we are long-term owners, to identify things that work, things that don't work, bring uses that the town's thinks would be attractive and needed in the city or in the town. And so for the past several years, we've tried to do that with the hotel, the grocery anchor, the restaurants, the cinema, even the ice rink, was a discussion with the planning board. So now that's sort of the big picture. Relative to the signing, signing is very important for mixed-use developments because of two things that we discussed at some length. One is the fact that we're really adverse to having big blank walls with, big box look with, basically open sides. For that reason, we passed a zero lot setback requirement, which allowed us to connect the buildings and get rid of the side walls of buildings. Likewise, we had a signing criteria that allowed us really to protect, it was more to protect us from some rogue tenants. So we tried to craft a sign center, since at the time the town did not have one that really would work with the types of tenants we brought in. And recognizing that we never know what type of tenant comes in. A sign that works really well for a cinema may not work really well for a Main Street specialty store or even a Point specialty store. So through the years, we've kind of taken the approach that the sign criteria that's been approved as part of our special permit has always been designed really to give us the authority to tell our tenants you can't do it. So whenever the planning board jumps in because they don't like something, we're glad they can, because it allows us to, do that. At the same time, the zoning, the special permit we have gives the authority to the planning board, and we've tried to take advantage of it, maybe spending too much time with the past planning boards, but to try to say every time we've had a plan or a sign or a major phase of the development get implemented, we've come before the board voluntarily to sort of share what we are envisioning, and everything that we've said, I think, has come pretty much the way we've depicted it. So jump forward now to today, 7 years later, after this first building got started. We're finding it sometimes hard to keep track of all the many different approvals that we've had over the course of 7 years. And so we suggested that we go for one final update. Now, I won't even call it final, but an update now, because we've completed the first wave of buildings, basically phases 1 and 2. We still have phase 3 to go. And before I get hit by a bus or I go senile and forget what we've been improving, we said we should really, I was very intrigued by your senior living code, by the way. It might allow me to move here. We wanted to put all the things that have been approved in the past into one package. Now, we don't always control all of the tenants. Just for clarity, there are some things, for example, that I just was up there today at Party City that do not comply with what we wanted. And I saw your email, and I appreciate the fact that someone flagged it. Some of the stuff we can control. Some of the stuff, by the time we enforce, especially with a national tenant, some of that gets taken down before we can do that. So sometimes it's, the little signs that are on the street, for example, that say, Kelly's Employment Service, those things, we believe not try to get our property managers to yank them out whenever, unless it's a good cause like the Littleton Road Race, where we just sort of, I don't think that complies with the sign criteria that we have. But, but I tend to go like this, and I presume that when someone complains to me, then I will then have to open my eyes and address it. But it's something like that, or the road race, or sometimes the high school kids want to sell cookies and they put a sign out. We're very accommodating to that because we think it's in the best interest of the town. So we don't use things like the Halloween banner. That should not be up there, quite candidly. I don't own that building anymore. That is owned by the Dumois supermarket chain. So they sort of have, I will have a discussion with them and ask them to reinforce the fact that we do have some criteria. And it's probably a good example as to why we did the special permit the way we did, because our standard as it was written to be, to ensure that things got built the way we envisioned it. And that vision wasn't just ours, it was one developed painstakingly with selectmen, neighbors, town officials, and what have you. So we're kind of adhering to that. The part that we just need to preserve is sort of the historical knowledge that what we have built has been presented pretty much regularly. I think even sometimes I show up and some planning board member says, we've seen enough of you this year, don't worry about it. But we feel very obliged to present everything we do before we build it. And so I think, Mark, you may be the only one that's been through all of them, and Maren, but I think that's what is in Tim's package. The things that weren't previously presented, I think have been extracted out of it. And so for us, it's just really kind of memorializing what has been approved, and at the same time, just reinforce to the planning board that flexibility is very, very important for this type of project. Without it, we never know what the next great, concept is. For example, the cinema wanted to do, a premiere theater as shown up here. None of that signing was actually identified in our criteria or in our special permit. However, in presenting the plan, it gave us the ability to present what their architects in Kansas City wanted to show, what they wanted to do, the effect. There was coordination between no flashing lights, no evolving color lights, and I don't know who was privy to all those discussions, but it resulted in something I think is very attractive and better for the town. So with that said, this was not meant to be a final give the developer carte blanche to do whatever they want. It really was meant for us to have a protective code that allows us to enforce a certain standard. And what we have found is that things that you don't expect when you're writing in code 7 years ago as tenants show up, sometimes we're able to do, prefer single line signs, but then we're finding out the new trend is to have, catchy, 2-line signs and, things like that, or big, things that have gotten much more graphic today, and to attract the right tenants, you need that flexibility. And I guess I don't want to make that decision by myself in the future on, if we get, to me, what might look obnoxious may be really exciting to other people, and things that may be exciting to me may be obnoxious to other people. We'd like to preserve the ability to always come to the planning board and say, this is what we're envisioning, this is the process. And so we aren't looking to change that. What we are looking just to do is memorialize the prior elements that have been approved. And then secondly, if there are things that are working well, not working well, we always like to hear that because it gives us a chance to constantly tweak it, the design as we go forward, especially with the next phase.
So, looking at this picture here. So I'll take you back 7 years when Mr. Park first came and presented the point, and he's correct. We did a special permit, we did expedited permitting because we wanted this down at the point. When Sam came in, or Mr. Park came in, he gave us street views. He gave us computer-generated renditions of what the streets would look like. And we saw the awnings, and we saw the tables where it was going to be a walkable, park your car one place, 3 tiers you'd be able to walk up there. And the painstaking detail, even Richard went over the detail of how it was going to look and the different gables and the materials that were going to be used. they had a better vision than us. So the way we left it was, you guys know what you want. You're building this themed place so that it's walkable. There's the fire pits there. There was talk of outdoor movies during the summer and things like that. So we left the signage, because we really don't have a sign bylaw that addresses this, up to them. And the streetscapes, and if you've been up there, you'll notice that the walkways are wider so that it is walkable. It's not just a small little sidewalk. The different levels, and it was designed that way so that this level, the level next to it, was low. It never looked like it was taller because of the elevation as you went up to the back. So it was designed to walk through. And like I said, he gave us street shots. We got all the way along how each phase was going to look, and we left it up to you. Okay, we let the maybe we left the wolf watching the chicken coop, but I think he's done a phenomenal job of what it looked like up there, and it made more sense than have them come back to us and the ZBA for every little issue on the signs, and that's how we did it, and that's how we wrote the special permit 7 years ago.
We actually, just to comment, you can shut me up if you want, but I tend to talk a lot. I get excited about this particular project. Our relationship with the town, I think through all levels, has always been one that we really value. I will tell you, and there have been very few towns that we've worked in where we actually thank the Conservation Commission, utility companies, Littleton Electric, the Planning Board, for their supervision and their help in getting it. Everyone, usually gets, in my role, gets in a something with, regulatory agencies. We have found that this cooperative relationship works pretty well, and we'd like to preserve that.
To be honest, we've had great success, from the selectmen to the planning
Now,
board to.
On the zoning, on our special permits, there's always things, because of the way it's written, a little vague. It actually gives us great latitude. We try not to take advantage of it. I can't speak again for Party City because I happen to, truth be known, I thought the big photos in the windows were attractive. So this maybe were just opinions are different. I do not like the Halloween sign. But there are sometimes reasons that pop up why it's important. For Party City, the building was built ideally having the windows, look into the space. Unfortunately, when that building got leased, Party City has cash registers and back registers visible through the windows. And we thought that was a problem. And so we encouraged them to bring something in that didn't say, too much text in it, but had nice graphics. We almost did it with the pet store place where we were going to do a mural with a cat and a dog, so that as you're down at Market Basket, you could see it on the side of the building. Because we're not adjacent to any other abutters, so to speak, that type of graphic actually brings the scale down architecturally to the pedestrian. When they're walking through the center, they without impacting a neighbor who might be 25 feet away, have a different opinion, this kind of adds to the overall sense that you're at a place that is fun and attractive. Again, this is where maybe my thought of an attractive sign isn't necessarily yours, Mark, or yours, Anna, but there's always a reason why we do certain things, and we're always open to discussing. But in the Party City one in particular, because that section of buildings were intended to be the junior anchor stores, we had a real design problem with not wanting to put opaque walls in place of the windows. We happen to like the glass. Whereas most, if you look at them, are usually fully blanked walls. So we try to prevent tenants from devolving to just blank masonry walls like a Kohl's. So that's, or a Target. So that's why you get stuck with windows, and sometimes it's an unexpected design challenge. If they had put in a really obnoxious piece of art, I think we probably would have jumped in and yelled at, the Market Basket folks who actually manage that building. But, candidly, I will take full blame for the kids. I like photos of kids and thought it was pretty attractive. But that said, it's, you see it as much as I see it, if not more, so we're always open for suggestions.
Do we have any issues, any questions or any issues?
So I have a couple comments. First of all, I love what you've done up there, and I enjoy it very much. I go up there at least twice a week, if not more. So it's been a great addition to our town. I'm certainly grateful you came, and you've done what you've done. That being said, I think if we memorialize what we're talking about for the sign amendment now, in part, we're actually granting a couple of the junior anchor stores. They're not in compliance currently. With memorializing the changes we're talking about, they would then become in compliance, and I'm not sure that that fits what we're trying to do.
Which ones exactly? Because I
So it
think,
would be Party,
Yeah.
it would Party City, and it would be Market Basket. So the
for
two-
which part? Which part is out of, I mean, the
so the
50%?
Yeah, the signs and the windows, they're covering too much of the window for Party City, and then the paper signs that are in Market Basket don't comply with what we wrote in the, what was written before I was on here. So I'm just trying to
Gotcha.
say that if I look back 7 years to what was written and what was drafted, they're not in compliance with what was created.
Correct.
from
So
the way
let me just, on the storefront signs, soon after we opened Market Basket, prior to the grand opening, Market Basket, and we came to the planning board to discuss the fact that they needed window signs. And at that time, we limited the window signs to 50% of the glass area, whereas they wanted to blanket, I think, the front. I think the correspondence is in the planning department file. I don't think Party City complies with that, because I think they have full 100% window coverage at this point. But I do think Market Basket complies with it. I don't think they're anywhere near 50%. I think they're closer to like 25% of the window frontage, if you actually take the glass
Does
area.
it say window front, or does it say window? I thought it said
It's the glass
50%
glazing
window.
area.
The whole glazing, not just, so if you took each window, are they covering more than 50%? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Oh, I see.
So,
That's the vagary that we're not sure. I get it.
right,
That's
so
fair.
that's where I'm going, is if you take
Yeah,
it
we took the
pane by
front,
pane.
yeah, we
right.
took the glass and said, here's the
Well,
glass
so
area.
I think that's where we're different. I think that if they were at 50% of each window, again, you're letting, because some windows are blocking full light.
Gotcha.
Some windows are allowing full light in.
Got it.
So if they were to comply, in my opinion.
Let me
what would
measure
it-
that for you, because it's sometimes a little deceptive, but I know,
Okay.
well, it's easy, Party City is 100% coverage. I will have to double-check what Market Basket has. I'm glad it's their buildings, not my buildings, but that said, they're a great tenant, so I don't want to, I just haven't measured the thing. Let me run down there, I'll take some photographs and have our guys actually scale it out for
Okay.
you. Even if it did comply, if it's something that annoys people, we would rather know that so that we can jump in and try to steer them to the right long-term solution.
So, things that might bother people.
Yeah.
And
that's-
again, an opinion, we have some 30-yard storage containers up there that are wrapped. Now, I don't know what's more attractive, a wrapped 30-yard container or just a 30-yard container, or no
Got
30-yard
it.
container.
So let me talk about that issue. During construction, we always have containers up there that store things while we're building. We also have this need to, every store that's ever opened in a center always wants to have certain things for a certain period of time. So I think the question is we did come to the planning board saying that we needed some canisters wrapped to sort of, we don't want permanent signs for that much permanent signage, because our permanent signage is really carefully designed to do certain things. But during sort of the construction process while we're building, we tend to wrap things because it does two things. It gives a certain exposure area on a temporary basis without us having to come in and say, we want to build a billboard on Constitution Avenue, knowing that it won't be there forever. Maybe some of them have outstayed their welcome. I might give you that, probably because the construction period has taken a little bit longer. But you might notice that a lot of them, the ones that were down on Route, I think on 119 have been taken off now that we got the rest of the signs up. We didn't want to put permanent signs with no storefronts, store names on them. So it's kind of a, just a feel for it. It's maybe not, but we did come to the planning board
Yeah,
and said we'd like, we actually had some very big ones for a while on 495. And those came down as soon as, we started the construction of O'Neill.
he did come and we did talk about it. And it was a temporary. thing. He may be correct in saying that it's been there a little too long, but we did talk about it. He's gonna have containers there anyway. He needs the signage for these brand-new
Sure.
buildings
I
that
get
are
why I
up
say,
there.
again, I'm just bringing up points that.
Sure.
That
No,
people
I
would
get it.
find annoying, so that is one of them. The other one is, when we talk about banners, things that blow in the wind or move too much to me, I think are, if you wanted to put a holiday banner on all your light poles, happy holidays and all those other sayings, I think that's fine, if it's a small banner, nothing like the one that was found on the highway that the Red Sox lost. I don't know a banner that big, but a small banner on each light pole, I think is
Does that
fine.
look okay to you? I mean, the ones that we
Yeah.
have right now say,
Yeah.
Sovital.
Sovital or Spavia, or,
Yeah, Sovital.
and then it says now open. Those are okay? I just want to make sure I'm not,
Yeah, I think they're okay. I just don't know that, you see the ones with the flexible spring that stick in the ground. and
those,
things.
yeah, we don't like those
Okay,
either.
as long
We
as-
just, but honestly, we sit there and chase, they go up. Stefan, who you may know, is always out there 24/7, is constantly taking them down. And once in a while, it's for a good cause, like the road race or something else. I say just ignore them, we'll take the heat. But for the most part, there's a certain amount of Solomon played as to if it's a good cause or, a
Right.
business cause.
And
But
so-
I don't think we've ever asked for what you might call the sales,
Right.
the sales sign. I
Right.
would agree with you, they look a little cheesy.
Yeah. So, that being said, and just overall, like we talk about blight in general, sign blight becomes annoying. So, I think there's people, and I don't want to speak for anybody else on the board, but Jamie, the other member, has had some issues with the signage at Party City. So if we have a document that she hasn't seen, because I want her to have the opportunity to weigh in on, that particular storefront. If there is an approval that was granted by this board before she sat on it, I would like for her to have an.
I don't know about the Party City, honestly, on the glass, the full cover of the buildings. I know we presented the design of the building, and it had the windows where they are, because they were already built. I don't know if that sign, that storefront, so I'd have to look into that one. We unfortunately don't own that building, so I'd have to check that. But I do know we presented most of the facades of the buildings before we went and pulled a building permit. I don't think it complies with the 50% window coverage. So I guess the question is was it ever actually approved or not approved? I'm not positive of that one. I'd have to check that with Marin.
Those would be my
Yeah.
points, so.
Yeah.
Again, I love the place, so.
Oh, well, I get it.
I have a couple.
Oh, yeah?
So, Mr. Park, thank you very much for being here
Sure.
tonight, and I also enjoy the point. So, as you said, you saw my email that I had forwarded to Maren. So, just to confirm what I think I heard, so the sidewalk signs, the ones that talk about for hiring, or the little sandwich boards, are those then not okay?
They may be considered amenities. I don't know if they legally, because they're not building permit, they're not subject to building permit, because they're not attached to the buildings. We don't have anywhere in our leases where we've precluded them. And generally, unless they're a safety issue, I do know when they look tacky, we tend to ask them to curb them. Sometimes they're nice, and sometimes they're very temporary, like the for hire signs. But I don't know actually how that's addressed. I think we've stayed away from it because it usually is temporary, and it's usually an amenity that the tenant is doing, and we don't have anything in our leases that preclude it. But we can look into that and see if we can tighten that up a little bit.
Well, as you said, if they're temporary, then maybe there's some sort of a time frame that gets
Sure.
solidified, just so that everybody's kind
Right.
of clear about that.
Okay,
That might
we'll look
be
into
helpful. Okay. So on the soft signs, or that's what I'll call them, the banners, or the really big ones, like with the Emerson Urgent Care, are they going to leave those, or are they?
No,
planning
those
on-
are, because we don't have a tenant in that building, and we're trying to create a feeling, drive people up the road, and because Emerson's a new use that's not typically retail, we wanted to make sure people knew where it was, both for two reasons. One is to attract people to the third level, but also because it is urgent care, we wanted to make sure until people knew exactly where it was very easy to find it. So we actually, that wasn't an Emerson sign, we put that sign up at our cost to try to do two things: hide the fact that there's a storefront missing on top of the tavern, and secondly, to give some exposure for the community to know where Emerson Hospital, or the Emerson Urgent Care. That sign should be coming down as soon as we have a tenant for the space above tavern on the square. And the one in their tower, I could talk to them, that, there's they built a hallway in front of the glass tower, which, a fire hall, which, I'm not sure why we spent a lot of money building that tower. But because the glass is there, they also had a concern that the critical care, and from the day one, they had some ambulances going to the lower level, trying to walk people up through the stairwell. So there was some, their signage people said, do you mind if we put this up here to make sure people know we're on the second level, not on the first level? And I guess Zuby Dental had a lot of people walking in for urgent care. And so they wanted to make sure people knew Emerson was on the second floor. I don't know what the solution is. Our preference would be to put a permanent mount sign up there.
Right.
And so if you can bear with us a little while, we'll try to work that out. It means us taking the glass panels out and putting in the white AZAC panel and then putting the sign on. But it's, we're happy to do that once Emerson knows exactly what it needs for its signing criteria.
So it sounds like every temporary banner, if you will, has a reason for being there.
Yeah, I think the ones on the Tower E as you're coming up, those are there because we're really trying to get people up to the next level. One of the biggest challenges we found with this stepped design,
Yeah.
besides creating a really fun place to be, it creates a hard time for people to know what's on the next level.
Yep.
So we have those up there. Ultimately, I think, there'll be certain, one panel on, for example, Tower E by where Sprint is will be converted to an actual a pylon. I think it was approved actually as a pylon sign, but we didn't put the pylon up. We just put these banners because we thought they're professionally done for, to kind of create that jazz, a little sort of sex appeal to the second and third levels. But it's never been intended to be more than the area that we had previously presented as sort of the banner areas.
Okay. Well, and as somebody who, the other banners, like the one that was up front for the country fair and
Yeah.
now the one for the road race, so I think the community really appreciates those, especially since our space over by the post office is no longer available to use for
Oh,
those
we're
kind of
happy to do that.
announcements.
That's, I think that's, our goal is to get the community to the center.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I could run the road race through there, we might even donate the trophies, but that might piss other people off.
One more final question, and that
Sure.
is in terms of, I was a little confused about how many logos or signs each entity is allowed to have. Is there a set number on that?
There is, DCU is a good example. It has 3, and because they have actually, they took 2 spaces. So what we don't like more than a primary sign and a secondary, and the reason the secondary sign, just to start with the 2, why we have 2,
Yeah.
because our buildings are designed as 360-degree buildings. It's not like a strip mall where the backside is all cinder block. So, for example, Starbucks has a logo on the backside of its building facing Constitution Avenue, because I think it breaks up the industrial look of back wall. So on building, that would be building G, correct?
Yep.
Building G has obviously got a roadway going to Market Basket on one side, the parking lot where everyone parks on the other side. So typically, it would be a front sign and a back sign. DCU has kind of 2 access points. Their store kind of breaks out to, the banking side and the office side, but they actually took 2 spaces. And so when we weighed the problem of having a blank wall between Anthony's, and it just looked out of balance, totally subjective, but it looked out of balance without the second sign. So DCU put up a second sign to kind of balance that out. That's really not typical. We basically limit it. What we've always found is I don't think this is in the thing, but 3 square feet per a linear foot of frontage is the most, if you're ever going to do a general code, you never want to do more than that. And so we try to live with that as well, with 2 square feet per linear foot for the actual store signs, and then 1 square foot for miscellaneous things like awning labels. For example, if you go to some places that have restaurants, they'll have aquitanes, and it'll say, in cursive letters on the black awnings, it'll say, French cuisine, or it'll say something like that.
Are you okay with that on the?
We
online?
like that because it actually makes people feel like it brings the scale of the sign down to the human eye level. Like Moe's has,
Moe's,
you notice
yeah.
that, Moe's actually, that's their logo, actually.
That's
So
part of their logo, the welcome to Moe's is part
If
of
you
it?
walk into Moe's to order a sandwich, the first thing you'll hear is everyone behind their counter go,
Oh, right.
"Welcome to Moe's." And I always say, "Welcome to be here," or "Glad to be here," but that's what that is there. They actually custom built that because it's part of their franchise package.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining
Sure.
all that.
So, do we want to get the final details and just have it brought back to us and leave it at that, or?
Yeah, I have no issue with moving forward to memorialize it once we have the information back on
Sure.
Party City and the measurements for the market basket.
Great.
I think you'd be okay. And
I do
hopefully-
think everything in the package has been presented before. I don't know if we have the full,
Even if we go back to, maybe we can find the meeting minutes and just
Sure.
see what was approved for both those locations, and whether it was meant to be 50% of the whole glazed area or 50% of each
I
window.
was there, I think it was just meant to be 50% of the window frontage, because we were, but I'll double check that. I thought Market Basket was well below what we approved, whereas I knew Party City was well above. And so the real question, if, for example, just taking a case forward, if we wanted to come back for a tenant, that's, a future tenant, next to the cinema or something that said, "Here's a sign," our goal, our process would be ideally to come back to here and go, "This is not really addressed in our special permit specifically. The vagaries are there, but we'd rather get say, does this work?" And if not, like O'Neill, they changed their sign 5 times to make the planning board happy. And so I think that's,
That was the first one I got to weigh in on.
oh, yeah, I mean, it was a nice process. I think O'Neill's like, we're spending a lot of time working on our signs but in my mind, the fact that it's not specifically addressed in our special permit means I have the ability to ask them to go seek your approval as a tenant when they go to submit it. And so we like that flexibility. What we also like about the way that the permit is written, it says, this planning board, which knows the project best, has final say on it, as opposed to some of the other, and you were empowered that through the town as an overlay district, is written into the overlay zone. So to us, that flexibility is very helpful.
We're glad.
No,
For 7 years, we've got a couple little minor things.
No, I think it's terrific, and those are my 2 issues, and I certainly would hope Jamie's available to weigh in on it as well, so.
Since Jamie's not here, he's welcome to call me, and I'm happy to answer his, I'm sorry, she. Sorry, it's all new members, so forgive me.
All right, so we'll just, whatever we can get.
Continue to the
My
next.
daughters are Avery, Devin, Cameron, and Sydney, so
So you get
they
it.
got baptized as boys
Yeah.
by accident, so I
All right, so
sympathize.
if we can get that for the next meeting, we can. hopefully-
Motion to continue to the next meeting for those
That's great.
2 issues.
Yeah, just for those 2 issues.
If anyone would like a site visit or an update on what else is coming, we're happy to walk you through, give you a hard hat since you're new, and kind of walk you through the complex, because there's some really neat things that have been done for the 2 stories, the new Metro Rock that's opening,
The climbing wall,
the
yeah.
climbing wall.
Yeah.
So we're happy to give you a tour if you'd
We
like.
should plan that.
Sure.
Part of our retreat.
Have
There you
that
go.
retreat, yeah.
You go on the ropes first.
Thank you, Mr.
There you
Byers.
go. Thank you.
Have a great night, folks, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're running a little behind, but we have an 8 o'clock continued public hearing. 8:15, excuse me, I can't even read the times. Senior residential developed special permit for 80 to 94 King Street.
Good evening.
Jennifer?
Good to see you again. Jennifer Platt with Anderson Krieger, here with Greg Roy from Ducharme and Millis, who is our engineer. We also have the applicant in full force here with us, Matthew and Michael Field, as well as Sheila and Janet. We have listened to you. We have taken a lot of comments over a lot of meetings from you, as well as we've listened to the comments from the consultant on the other project for Jones Meadow. and we revamped our plan. And what I'd like to do is go over a little bit about the layout first, and then talk next about the amenities. What you could see here, and this again, this is from comments that we've gotten from the board as well as from the consultants, is we have tried to make a mix out of the arrangement of units. So you can see, rather than having everything clustered together, or, that's old.
This is an old one.
So this is what it looked like. So that was, I think you're going to see, we have a much.
A lot of this stuff came out of our last week's hearing, so we're sorry, this is hot off the press.
So, a much more attractive plan, I think you'll agree. But we have a 17 cottage-style units, nine of them are detached, 8 of them are attached as duplexes, and it allowed us to move them around and cluster them a bit more to provide some access to the open space in the rear of the property and around the exterior of the property, and to provide more open space both overall and in the center area within the center of the driveway. Again, this basic plan meets all of the design requirements of the bylaws in terms of number of units allowed. It exceeds the amount of open space. We have 33.3% of open space over the 30% that's required, plus the whole septic area, which is going to be a large grassy field area, is not included in the septic, or I'm sorry, in the open space count, but it is a large open space that will be accessible and usable. Again, backyards are not included, but we do have, and when we talk about amenities, you'll see we've included around the exterior of the property a walking path, both for residents to be on-site and use the property, as well as to exit the property and access the high school, which is in the upper left-hand corner. Again, taking some of the comments we heard from you and the consultants, there is a continuous sidewalk which goes around the exterior of the drive as requested. We've also, you'll see there's a number of shared driveways, and those are meant to both reduce the amount of driveway and to reduce the curb cuts, so it makes the sidewalks a little bit less interrupted with curb cuts. In terms of some of the amenities that we've provided on this, I think the developer's really gone out of their way to try to make this a site that people would be able to enjoy and use while they're there, including the walkways around the property. You'll see that we are in preliminary discussions with the town in terms of putting some tennis courts, which would be part on this property, part on the high school property. And those are on the upper left where they're currently proposed, so they could be used both by high school as well as residents of the community.
So that's those rectangles?
Those are the rectangles up in the far left-hand corner, upper left-hand corner. We've proposed a common gazebo in the center area, also connected by the walk paths, so that's a center meeting area. We've proposed, so I'll point these out on the plan here, a couple areas of community gardens where we were suggesting perhaps some raised beds as a community gardening area. Tennis courts, of course, and then also when we were proposing a bocce court or field up here, which could be on the leaching field. Again, it's not part of the open space, but it is a open space type amenity that could be provided and provide some activity on site. Going through here, what else? There are fun things. One of the, a couple other design features we're exploring now is we're trying to make this as eco-friendly as possible. Developers have been looking into either a heat pump system, Energy Star heat pump system, or we were also looking into geothermal, but trying to find some sort of heating source for all of these units that are going to help contain the cost and make these more affordable for the residents once they're in there. Greg did. What else am I missing?
I think you touched on it. The circulation pattern is very similar to before. We just, as Jennifer said, we were able to, one of the suggestions that I think was good was to sort of look at a clustering approach, so the units that you see on the left side of the, right there, yeah, allowed us to take one of the units out of the middle and put in more of a centralized gathering place.
Near there. And I think this is really important, having access to all this open space. Before, it was a bit restricted
Right.
back here, and you couldn't get here, and I think this really opens up the property for people to circulate around it more, and to have these access into the green spaces, and make those more a part of the community, make them more accessible.
Yep. So, other than that, from an engineering standpoint, there's not much difference. We're still proposing the same, although the details aren't provided on this plan, but we'd be proposing the same type of septic systems and utilities, the same type of stormwater systems. We'd be managing 100% of the stormwater on site, so,
These are all, again, all single level,
yes, single level, yep.
zero clearance.
Zero entrance.
So the units are the same as what we proposed to you last week. We just did, at I think, a suggestion of one of the members of the board, or perhaps someone from the audience, looked at a mix of duplexes and singles.
Off the bat, real quick, just a safety note, looking at and I love the trails that you guys are showing, and how you're showing, how it goes up to the high school. It works in my mind. The only thing I would say is where you're locating it on the road that leads up to the high school. You might want to move to the inside of that corner along the high point of the tennis court.
Yeah.
Just for safety to cross at that area. Other than that, I think that
Yeah,
in that scenario, it works.
And that's all doable.
absolutely.
Yeah, so just want
Yeah, we'd
watch it. I
Certainly some
drive my
flexibility.
son to school, well, he got his permit last Friday, so now he'll be driving my Jeep to school with me in it.
I got you.
Good luck.
Yeah, I know how fast the kids travel that road
Yeah.
sometimes, so I would just think if we moved it up a little bit,
Yep.
it would be appropriate. The other thing, this handout, I think you guys is terrific, just to show us what could be the amenities, so I appreciate you taking the time to actually put that together in color and in detail, raised gardens, the gazebo, the tennis, the bocce. It's a good presentation, so thank you for taking the time to do that. Sidewalks, I see that it goes all the way around the outside. You get the 3 units on the inside. Do they have a sidewalk anywhere that they can access to get to? Even if you put something in front of the 3 of them and then a crosswalk over to the larger sidewalk?
We could look at that.
So it looks like open space area, and I don't want to make it too impervious, because it looks nice in the green that you have on this display, so, but maybe they get a sidewalk from unit 15 down to 17, and then a crosswalk over somehow.
Sure.
Otherwise, they're too isolated. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an island, yeah.
We can look at that, for sure.
And
Yeah.
then, when we're coming down, so I'm on sheet number 1, it's the one that's overlaid with
Yeah, with
Google
the-
Maps.
yeah.
When I'm looking at it, we still see the old parking lot to Weber, which I know is used for parking for the music store currently.
Yeah.
As an open space plan, that would be reclaimed and remade into open space, correct? That would be, it would no longer be a paved area.
Wait a minute.
Yes. So that's just this small part right up here?
No,
Nope,
down
nope, come down
below.
to the bottom,
Oh, here.
Yep.
right there. So, that area there, because it's part of the open space plan, it should be an impervious.
It's going to be part of the open space plan. The
I'm
parking
sorry,
lot right there that goes onto the pervious,
Shingle.
that's now Weber's, is going to be turned into grass.
That's, yeah, the portion that looks like belongs to the music store, if you want to work out something where you can help maintain that rest of it for him for parking, but just want to make sure that is.
We are in communication with
Right.
him, with
Okay.
working with that.
All right, and then,
Was here.
we have the sidewalk that comes all the way down to King Street on one side of the road. Everything else, I guess I'm trying to find where, if somebody was coming, let's say from the 495 direction up King Street, and they were going to cut through your development for bicycle reasons or jogging, walking, whatever, that they haven't.
Yeah, you could get right through and go right up to the
So
school.
you get the
Yeah.
crosswalk right after the first 3 parking spaces. No, it works. I think it works, so.
Or you could just continue on that same side and then,
Well, hopefully someday the state will give us a sidewalk.
Yeah.
And you see, we did relocate 3 of the guest parking spaces
Right.
to the other side of the development, so they're split, so I think it's a better distribution of where the visitor parking spaces are, so they can be parked close to, on either side of the development.
If you don't mind, Mr. Field, did you have a chance to speak to the AD regarding the tennis?
Yes, we did, and I'll let Michael talk on that.
Yeah, I met with Mike Lynn on Tuesday, and I also talked to one of the selectmen, that's familiar with it as well.
Greg, you have the letter, right?
I don't know if I do.
If I left it on your desk yesterday. We
Oh,
have a
does it?
copy of the letter I can forward to Lauren if you'd like.
Sorry about that, I don't know if I...
Mike Lynn summarized
They're
the
very interested
conversation.
in working with us. They don't-
Okay, and so a select member also was part of the conversation?
Yes.
and-
Yep.
Okay. If we can get that letter
Yep.
submitted as part of the package, that would be great.
Forward it tomorrow now.
Okay.
Can you believe I'm speechless?
It's late. Are you happy with it?
At this moment, I don't have any questions. I am thankful that you all have taken the time to come up with things that might work for this particular community, and that seniors would enjoy for various activities. So, yeah, I don't have any other questions at this moment.
Okay. What size are the units going to be?
They're 1,360 square feet.
All of them the same size?
Same
Yes.
size, 32 by
Price point?
52.
I'm sorry?
What's the price going to be?
We haven't determined that yet.
Any idea?
None that I have, we've been working to get this where we are right now. We haven't even looked at it.
I mean, there will be every effort, as I said, to try to make these affordable for the residents, including looking into affordable heating sources, which, as you know, up here is a big chunk of the cost of running a unit. We have been working on this plan with you since February, so there are costs that will go into this that just from the
Well,
permitting process.
But one of the things you say here is that you don't want to provide any affordable units.
No,
No, we have,
we're providing the affordable units
We're
as
providing
required by
affordable
the
units.
bylaw. We can do that in terms of providing money to the town,
I
but
would
it
rather
absolutely meets
provide-
the
It says right here,
10%.
applicants propose fee in lieu of site units pursuant.
But
That was last, so now we have,
are you going to build them on site, or are you going to
Yes.
provide them?
we're going to
No.
build them on site.
so we also have a different price point too. Instead of just being single-family units, we do have duplexes that are at a different price point than a single-family unit as well. They're
A little bit less.
a little bit less.
It should be, anyway.
They reduce some of the cost by sharing walls and some of the site work, and we do want to do the affordable aspect as, as with the town, with the affordability in the new, this bylaw.
Okay. I don't have any,
So right now you're talking about providing affordable units on site. We're not going to
Yes.
the
Yep,
inclusionary zoning
correct.
bylaw,
Yep.
not payment in lieu of.
right.
Nope.
Correct.
Yep.
I was kind of excited about the payment in lieu of. I want to see some money go into that affordable housing
See,
trust
I'm not,
fund.
I want the houses built.
know.
You just came back, so you weren't here. You're aware that the parking lot down at the bottom of your property, that's open space and it's going to go away, correct?
Yes.
So you won't have any parking down there.
Well, it looks like he's got half of it.
We,
Well, how are you going to get at it?
There's
It's a-
a excavation and grading, they're gonna generate fill, I'm sure they can create.
We're working on that one.
We're working with him. I just want to make sure he wasn't here. I
Yes.
just want to make sure you were aware.
I sat down with him, we've met with the engineer with him on that as well.
That specific thing, and as you no doubt remember when I was before.
I don't know if that, I don't think we should.
If you're gonna speak, would you mind just going to a microphone? So-
I actually would rather if you didn't, but,
Hey,
nice.
Thank you.
My name is Carl Strathmeyer, and my wife and I own the property at 80 King Street, which is now the music store and 2 residential apartments. And yes, we are aware of the parking situation, as the board probably remembers. I have been before you several times talking about possible options there, and I am in discussion with the applicants here as to whether we can come to some mutually agreeable and sensible arrangement for that parking.
You do know that it can't make you non-compliant. You have to continue with what we agreed upon when we gave you your special permit way back when.
I understand that it's my responsibility to continue to provide parking through some mechanism, yes.
Okay. We gave you the parking lot down there when we did it.
It was temporary use.
Temporary use, until you just made your final determination as to how you were going to come up with enough parking for your.
Yes, sir.
your
Actually, the
apartments
town
and-
bylaws provide, the zoning bylaws provide for, if I have a written agreement to use an abutter's parking area, that counts as much as parking on my own land. And I have had, up until this change's title, I have had such an agreement.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
as long as you're aware of it, okay?
Yes,
No
sir.
problem.
thank you.
Thank you for being here, too. It's important that you're here. So thank you.
I had to go back and close the store and then come back.
Okay.
Duty calls.
So, do we want to send it out to peer review? What do you want, what's the board's,
Yeah, the minor change for that, just that one crosswalk, because you know it's going to be written by them, so might want to make that change before you send it to peer review, but outside of that, I'd be,
Well,
I'd make a motion to send it to peer review for.
I second.
are you prepared to send it out to peer?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good, good. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you.
So obviously, we haven't formally submitted these plans to you yet, we're just, talking, so we will formally submit them, and as soon as possible, so we can get that going.
And then we can send it out, sure.
And will we be seeing the housing unit plans after the peer review? Or,
We
How do you
can,
like to do that?
We can get those going.
Yeah, we need,
it's the
that's
same
going to be part
footprint as
of
that,
it.
that's there right now, and we can get a
And
full
price,
ID and a.
and price point too. She's going to want to talk about, Judy, I think, is going to want to see that. So, you could give us.
included in
I don't,
I
it's
think
not part
there's,
of the
I think
bylaw.
there's some discussion about it now, that this price point and the new bylaw that you're trying to.
Yeah, I think.
I'm sorry, hold on a
Just
second.
clarify how you would propose to price the affordables.
Yes,
Right.
yep.
Oh, so, okay.
Is it not the same as the existing bylaw?
It's not the 186,000?
Yeah, it always takes into account the condo fees and utilities costs. It'll be close to that.
Yeah, it'll be close to that.
Right.
Okay.
So you're going to need to, you have the public hearing for the special permit open. Going to go for peer review, should continue. The question of when we should try to get back to this one.
What was their turnaround time on Jones Meadow?
It took over a month between both of them, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I'll know early next week what to expect for schedule. But are you still looking for things 2 weeks ahead of time, or how do you want to?
So,
I'm a little concerned about trying to get anything done for October. but
right,
I don't-
No, not October.
First meeting in November will be.
Maybe November 1.
My phone died.
just because I think we, as I recall, we already have like 6 or 7 items for October.
So we're,
Yeah, first meeting in November.
Let's see if that works.
First meeting in November.
November 1.
Whatever the first
Is it November
Thursday in
1st?
November.
Yeah,
November
same,
what?
right.
Even though we're doing the 29th for town
Town
meeting?
meeting, well, it's your schedule. What would you-
You want to meet the first week in November, because town meeting's the 29th
Of November or
of
of
October.
October?
So that would give us, we meet on a Monday, maybe Monday, right? So that,
And Thursday's the meeting.
so I'm asking if that's okay. That's,
What date?
the 29th of October is Monday night, so
Right, that's town meeting, yeah.
November 1st
It's
is,
3 days later.
is 3 days later,
Yeah.
that's our meeting. Do you want to meet both times in that week, or do you want to push it back 1 week into the second week of November?
No, guys make me miss too many meetings at my other place, second week in November.
Okay,
so.
we'll wait, yeah. I'm good, because,
Okay.
yeah,
That's fine. November 1st is fine with me.
okay.
And could the board clarify for us, I'm sorry, I was, it seemed a bit confusing by what town council was saying and perhaps Maren was saying and the board about grandfathering of plans that are in front of you now under the current bylaws. Because if this amendment to the bylaws is in front of the town meeting end of October, we want to be clear, because we've heard this from various parties in town, but we'd like it on the record that this plan is being reviewed under our current bylaws and is grandfathered under the current bylaws.
I don't think it is. It's not a subdivision. It's, according to what Chris said.
I don't,
Wasn't it said by
Yeah,
Mr. Bergman that there were two that were grandfathered?
At the last,
As well as this board said it to us as well.
In order to get a resolution, is okay if Jennifer and Chris have
Absolutely,
a
yeah.
discussion? I mean,
Yeah.
the rest of us would just be guessing.
Right, you can talk to Chris to find out if your grandfather.
And it doesn't matter, because we're making the application now anyway, so
Right.
we're making the application.
as long as your
Yeah.
application is submitted, then.
Well, that applies for preliminary and definitive subdivisions where this is a special permit application. That's where I'm not clear
Right.
on the answer.
So, yeah, let Chris weigh in, and I'm not sure either. Because it's not a subdivision, it's not,
But
Well, with all the hard work that's been done.
where you have an A&R that's ready to submit,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're already there. Okay. He already has a solution
Has that A&R not been submitted?
No.
Then it will
No.
be shortly.
before town meeting.
Yes.
Well, absolutely, it's ready to go. It's just,
So, in my opinion, whatever you guys got to do to get your holding spot for the existing bylaw, please do. Because what you proposed and have worked so hard on, at our request, by all means, whatever you need to do, please do it, so that you get it's held.
I think this is a nice plan. I think this is one that this town could be supportive of and happy to see. I think it's really,
We've got affordable component in there, and we've got the design criteria, that, as long as, when we see the floor plans and everything else, but as we're going forward, I have no issue with what you've shown.
and I'm sure there'll be some comments back from the consultants, hopefully some minor things that'll help still improve it a bit more, but I think in terms of conceptually, we have something that seems workable. It definitely complies with the existing bylaws and with the feedback we've gotten over the last 6 to 7 months. So we'd like to be able to take this forward.
I still have an issue with price. I'm always gonna have an issue with price.
And that's, we can make, They have to be
Again,
built,
I'll
and
say
you
it, I'll
can't-
say it over and over again, you can't control the market.
I'm looking for affordability on the whole thing.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we are changing the bylaw.
Exactly. That's why we're doing it in the first place, to get, so we can control the price.
Do what you can.
yeah.
Exactly. I'm just looking to see how they come out with it. That's all. Good.
So continue to the November 1st
November
meeting?
1st, yes.
Thank you. We're not done yet.
we're not done. But thank you very much. We appreciate your
Thank you.
support on this. You're good. Thanks, Greg.
We got two more things. You've got, they've got questions on Cooper Farm, and you have Durkey bond reduction.
There's not even anyone for Durkey?
Yeah.
Chris is there.
Oh, all right, okay.
Thank you.
I didn't. All right. Cooper Pond, what about Cooper Pond?
Thanks, Mike.
No. Don't have to apologize to it, it's fine.
So, on Cooper Farm, we were, that plan was approved late, or mid-last year, about a year ago. We have been working on that development. A number of the single-family lots have been sold. We're now at the point where the 55 and over condominiums are ready to be sold, and we need a release of those lots from the subdivision covenant. As you know, for the single-family lots, we set up a roadway escrow agreement, which had about $420,000, I believe, set aside to ensure that the final construction of the roadway and various other site improvements would be taken care of. The majority of those have actually been completed already. They've been signed off by Green International. We've had the check off on those. We haven't come to you and asked for a reduction of that escrow amount. That being said, we're now looking to release the 55 and over condominium lots. The majority of that road work has been done. There's about 25% of the site work left to do on that, but the total expense there, from what I've seen, and I believe that was shared with Maren earlier today, is around $120,000. All in, there's probably twice as much in escrow as what we're estimating would be required to finish everything on the site if, for any reason, the developer stopped building out the project. So what we need from the board is your approval to release the over 55 lots from the subdivision covenant, and if we want to secure those by the existing roadway escrow agreement, that's doable.
I guess the first question is, are you going to require a bond for the shared residential driveway? You've done some of one, some of the other. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Depends on the situation.
My understanding is it's
It's
not.
really- Oh, go ahead.
I said that it was not required. That was through our permitting process. There's the subdivision road, which, as you know, from the approval from the covenant from the planning board, we have a number of requirements on, including the requirement to come back and put in the top coat once everything is completed. There's not that same obligation for the driveway. It's a single driveway for the 55 and over.
But it's part of the roadway
Well,
structure.
where it was permitted as a shared residential driveway, the bylaw requires a cash bond, but sometimes the board decides to require a bond for a private driveway, sometimes you don't. You've had practice of doing either, so.
Don't we need to get Green to weigh in as to,
So Maren, as town planner, could you do a site walk for us as opposed to spending any money on greens? And
we need a number.
We have a proposed bond estimate. They have called out the work that's left to do, and I think Jennifer explained that the existing bond that's in place, the amount would cover the work left to do both on Cooper and on Dean Lane.
By about 200%. It's like twice as much as required for both sides, at least.
Yeah, so I guess we just need direction on what you'd like to do.
Rather than have Green, can we have town engineer, make sure he's okay with it?
Is the town engineer going to have to, are they going to review the road itself? Are they going to estimate what's left to be done, or are they going to, or can we look at what our costs are with our contractor to finish the work that we contracted with them for?
A bond is generally the cost for the town to complete the work, where it's a shared residential driveway to remain private.
Private.
It remains private, and there was.
Green International doesn't even review
private driveway.
But it's
The
private
private
coming off of
driveway.
a public way, right?
It's still a private way right now as it is now.
And you're gonna pave it, you're gonna take care, I mean, you're
It's
gonna
already-
plow it.
It's already paved,
Yeah.
we're plowing it now.
Plow it and take care of it. and
There's
maintain it.
there's an association that's gonna be set up similar to White Street where they have a private contractor that plows, maintains it, does the mowing. We already have that in our,
There's a homeowners association for the single family, as well as a condominium association for the 55 and over.
they're separate associations
But they're
already.
both, on both sides, they're required to maintain, plow,
And that's already been set up.
and we also.
Lauren, I'd be looking for your expertise to weigh in on this, and I have no issue with the release of the bond if you were to say that the requirements.
No,
Just release of the lots.
And it's
Not the
not,
lots.
it's not even lots, it's
Yeah.
houses itself. There's only one lot.
There's only one lot.
So,
It's the 55 and older one.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I have,
They aren't
if you were to say
single-family
that
lots.
that it's satisfied, then yes, if you went out there and had concerns and you were to share with the board, then we could discuss it, and I think that should be at our next hearing.
I was just going to say, as a point of order, this isn't something that's on our agenda for tonight, and I know that I would like to just make sure I understand what lots are being released, especially since I think Cooper Farm hasn't been discussed in the last couple of months. So is it something that we could do on October 4th?
It is an administrative matter that the board can handle without
And it's not public notice.
publication. I should have a plan here.
And they're not lots, they're just condos, so they have shared, there's
Access
no
way.
actual lot line delineation between each unit.
It's one lot.
It's one lot, it's a condo where they're all the same lot, they have, exclusive use areas around their house.
But that's
We
part,
don't
of- but
have
that's part of the
any-
condo document, it's not.
Right, it's part of a condo
not
document,
zoned.
there is no actual lot line delineating each unit of each structure. So it's not a single lot getting released each time, it's actually the condo 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's no actual lot getting released.
Give me the files, right behind you. Perfect, thank you. That was
When I think I understand things.
So
plans here. Orange, you have one of the Cooper
So-
Farm.
I would just like somebody else to weigh, even if it's just the,
I'm good with that, and if they go out there, I'd like to go with them. So,
Come on out tomorrow.
yeah.
While we're having the discussion, has there been any more conversation with the Cooper Farm house, what the plans are for that?
We've been in discussion with the selectmen.
Okay. Do you want to share with, just because we're always asked the question by residents and other people, what are the plans for that house?
We're going to turn it over at a future date.
Okay. It's going to the town?
It's going to the town.
Okay. No, thank you.
I would at least like the town engineer, or at the very, I shouldn't say very least, Brian, but I would at least
Now,
like.
he's been out here, you can call him and ask him, he was out
driving
Monday.
around yesterday.
Yeah, he drove
I
around
mean,
Monday.
the 55 and over is not even under the purview of Green International. They don't,
They didn't even inspect, they inspected the retention ponds, 3, 4, 4, 2, and 1. They didn't inspect pond 3.
Okay,
it's not part of their,
there you go. So
The-
Dean Lane is that loop
Right there.
road there.
So, basically, the lot line is somewhere here?
yes.
It's
It's over to your left, right
This
there.
way?
Right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And then up to here?
Yes.
Yeah, and it goes right around. So it's a one, I think it's a 5.5 acre site, the whole thing, roughly.
Mhm.
And we have and I'll show you which units we have. I'll do it on this one.
Oh, we need it.
So we have unit 16, 14, 13 built, and 11. They're all ready.
Okay.
But it's a single drive loop, so it should be released as a
lot.
as a whole.
Given all of the new information that they've sent, I don't have any concerns.
Okay.
If anybody else is interested in any of that information, of course, I printed it all out. I have.
So, at this point, I'd make a motion to release the lot.
I would not have any problem with that. I'm hesitating to recommend, but
But you can still come
I'm
out and
happy
look
to
at the
recommend.
lot.
We would love to have you come out tomorrow. Come look at the
How
one
about if we
unit.
release it subject to
tomorrow, but maybe next
the
week.
engineer, town engineer saying he has no problem with it?
I get the answer to the only question I had a concern about, so now that I have that answer, I'm willing, I don't have any issue.
What was the answer?
That they're gonna release the farmhouse to the town at a later date. So, I'm good.
At a future date. That's not even, I just want to make sure that everything getting up to it is fine, is up to snuff with the town administrator, the town engineer, that's all.
If there was any problems, we would have, as far as me, I would like the town engineer to at least inform me of it if there was a problem. Because if there was a problem when he came out last week, the week before, or Green
Mine,
International, or any
I'll
of their
amend my
inspections,
I'll
I would be almost insulted if they
He's making a
didn't.
motion.
I'll amend my, not a motion, but motion, to include that we release the lot pending that you have a conversation with the town engineer and he's satisfied with the road construction. If he's not, that he can please inform the developer of his concerns, and once they are documented in an email delivered to them electronically, that they will, and they respond that they will take care of them, then we release the lot. So no more meeting, okay?
Second.
I have no problem, I just want somebody to weigh in before we release the lots, that's all, I'm good with that. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Appreciate your help on this.
Thank you. Well, now what do we, the bond release.
Yeah, he's been sleeping.
Oh, sorry, what?
That he's been sleeping on.
Don't go.
I won't go anywhere.
No, we're done with
But
you.
we're good? Thank you. Thank you.
Now you can go. Here's fine.
Thank you all, we appreciate it.
Jennifer, nice to see
So
you.
we have Durkey Drive up there for a bond
Bond
release.
reduction.
Mr. Colonel, how are you?
That's it.
How you doing?
It's been a while. We've been to see your counterpart. It's good to see you again.
Yes. I like it when he comes.
Come on, this was an interesting one.
What's that?
You enjoyed this one, though, right?
Yeah.
A lot of good banter.
Yes.
Okay, so we have where is it?
It's in my email, and it's in my files that I don't have access to. Here. You have a bond reduction request.
What were you said, you're gonna remind me to ask him?
It was scheduled for reconstructing the detention basin at the corner of Fraser and Balsam. The one that's not working. Right,
What does that have to do with this bond release?
that was,
Well,
This bond release has to do with what everyone's already agreed to, right? But the money we're requesting back has nothing to do with the rebuilding of that bond, so I don't understand where that's
so
coming from.
the bond includes reconstruction of that? The bond amount includes reconstruction of that?
The remaining bond amount?
Yes.
The bond that Green and everybody agreed upon before this meeting had to do with rebuilding that pond?
No, that's
Is-
not, I think the question we're asking is the remaining amount, so let's say we move forward and we grant the bond release, the remaining amount, there's an amount in there that includes rebuilding the detention bond that he's talking
No,
about?
there's not an amount in there.
Well, that's the question, is there?
That's the question. That's the question I'm asking. Is there an amount?
This is the first time I've heard anything about rebuilding the pond again.
Me
So
too. I don't know if it's the
was-
pond or it's the
It's the
detention
detention area.
basin, it's not the
Right,
pond.
and that's always been on the schedule to be reconstructed, reconstructed, rehabbed, rehabilitated, so it
Functions,
functions.
which I'm sure is your intent anyway, if it's not functioning, to make it function.
Our intention is that everything function
Mhm.
upon completion of the project.
So,
We're asking, because that phase is pretty much all done, and you're asking for a release of funds of when you're going to schedule to rebuild the detention pond. It's not supposed to store water, and it's storing water now, and it's a safety issue. And now that we have you in front of us to ask for bond release, we want to know when you're planning on doing that.
Well, tonight was a bond release, not a technical meeting. I would have brought an engineer with me if we were going to talk technical.
You've known about this for over a year.
Mark, respectfully, if I knew we were gonna discuss rebuilding a pond tonight, I would have brought an engineer with me. I would have brought a team of engineers with me.
Okay. Well, how does it
So
go?
I'm not prepared to speak technical terms about rebuilding. My understanding is we submitted paperwork signed off by your third-party engineer in agreement for $260,000 plus or minus dollars to be released tonight, and everyone was in agreement. And there was no discussion about coming in to talk about rebuilding a pond tonight. But I'm happy to do that at some other date, and our intent is to have all ponds and drainage working per plan upon completion of the project.
Mara, what's the remaining balance if we release you can't get to it? So let's
It's on my email and I can't.
get it from here, because you're here instead of there.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's see if we can't come up with something that works for all parties here. It's been reviewed by Green International. If Green, I would make a motion to release the bond with a condition that Green weighs in that there's enough remaining funds to take care of the issue with the detention pond that isn't functioning properly at this time. And I don't know which detention pond it is. I haven't driven through there in a while, so I don't know which one we're talking about. What is it? G?
It's the first one as you come in, right where the T is. The one, remember they had to desilt it because that's what they said was wrong with
Yeah,
it
so they had to scratch the bottom out. And
to get it to
It's at
drain.
the corner of Balsam and Fraser Street.
Okay.
I don't know what letter or pond it is.
Okay, so,
I know what we're talking about.
so that one, so at the corner of that road, those roads,
Right.
if they can weigh in and say that there's, the remaining funds of the bond are enough to do all the road repairs, whatever's left in their scope of work, if that's covered, then,
Well, the issue really is, the money that's set aside is basically for the roadway. It has nothing to do with the detention ponds, because they're already in place in the structures, and there probably isn't enough money left aside if something has to be done to it. We don't,
I think you could vote contingent on assuring that
that
work
green,
is included in the bond.
Right.
That's,
but we also want a time frame. This is gonna, we're coming up to the winter again, and that's gonna all be full of water and stay full of water. It needs to be working. And, you know, if it takes holding the money until they get it fixed, I think the sooner we get it fixed, the better off everybody. It's a safety issue. A kid could walk, it's a
So-
pool. It's a safety issue. It's not supposed to have standing water in it. If it does, we're supposed to have a
so
fence around it.
I would amend my motion to contain that if the pond isn't draining by the winter months, that they put a barrier around it to protect any accidents from occurring. If they're not able to.
Not to be confused with any other stream or pond in the town of Littleton as a safety hazard. You're talking about a retention pond that's holding a foot of water right now? That's the safety hazard?
That's the, again, I'm looking for.
I'm just asking, are we gonna barrier all the streams and rivers in town to make sure nobody gets hurt?
Your development was supposed to pre and post not
I'm
have
just
any.
asking where the hazards are.
It's supposed to be,
So I'm looking for the same information then. So
you've got-
how deep is the pond and how much water is in it?
Well, that's a very good question. We should probably
I would
find
say
that
there's
out.
no more than 12 inches of water in it.
I would,
At any given time, given the fact that we just got 4 inches of rain the other day on a silted pond, I would imagine there might be a little more than that. But it's been down as little to the bottom of that pond as well. So,
Since we don't have the relevant information,
okay, we do. It's just in a different format. Okay, have a.
I'm just confused because
Letter?
we came here tonight to do a bond release and none of this has been mentioned previously. Otherwise, I would have brought the appropriate people with me, but here we are and we're talking about something that was never mentioned.
you've known about it for a year.
Mark, that's not what we're here for.
Well,
I
yeah,
know
but
about a lot of things.
you're here to ask for monies.
That's not what this meeting is about.
This meeting's about releasing money. We want to make sure there's enough money left to the town to
The
fix.
meeting's about,
everything.
we fill out a schedule of values and your peer review engineer agrees with
Does your
that.
schedule have an amount of how much to fix the pond?
Honestly, Mark, I am sitting here filling in for my business partner who had surgery this week, and,
I'm just asking you.
I have no idea. I
Well,
have
then-
not seen the form, Mark. Well, I was told that this was reviewed by your peer engineers,
Yeah,
and that this was all set, that everybody was in agreement with all of the figures provided. Hence, this was...
maybe they forgot to figure it out.
Well,
Obviously, it,
maybe they didn't, Mark.
For Durkey Farm Estates, the drainage, the amount to propose to remain in the bond is $1,000 to clean the drainage system.
that's it?
That's what's proposed. That's the request.
That's
So-
not enough.
$1,000 to scratch the bottom of a detention pond?
That's not the only issue that's out there. You're gonna leave
Was
$1,000.
that, did Green sign off on that, Mark? Is that,
We have the request from yesterday from Hancock Associates.
and it was reviewed by Green?
Well, I don't know that that review was,
No, I'm not releasing a dime until Green has a chance to look at all the drainage issues out there to make sure there's enough money set aside to take care of the issues out there.
okay, there was, the initial bond was, numbers were sent, Green reviewed those, had a few comments. Brian sent his letter yesterday with the amounts. Current.
What was Green's responses?
I have not seen a response from Green on that.
So we don't even know if Green agreed to it.
Okay, so you have before voted contingent on review of the amount by the peer review engineer. Do you want to do that, or do you want to wait till the next meeting?
Yeah, I don't want, so I think that's fair to put it to the peer review, and the peer review says 1,000 is enough, or the peer review says withhold 10,000. Would you agree to that?
Certainly.
Okay, then we keep moving, because...
That's how I thought the process worked.
Yeah.
I thought that both engineers have already come to terms on this.
Right, so it sounds like there's just one more step in the review, and whatever that amount may be suggested by Green, if you'll agree to that, then I make a motion to...
You guys before, we're going nowhere.
Yeah.
Everything functions.
Yeah, so...
Yep, so the current Turkey Farm Estates bond amount for Phase 1 and 2 is $380,000. The request a reduction of the bond to $280,000. That would be the one where you want the review of the number for the drainage to make sure there's enough funds available for reclaiming that first detention basin. And then the second request is for the K Estates bond, that current, for Fur Lane. That bond, tri-party agreement is for $270,000. We request a reduction of the bond to leave $110,000. And pending review of that final worksheet by Green.
So Green hasn't worked on that one in town.
They worked on it the first time, just not after.
Hancock's response.
Right, and not after the Hancock's letter from yesterday. It's been through the process once.
And what about the town engineer? Has he looked at it?
No,
So he hasn't even seen what Green's agreed to?
no,
So,
not in one day.
well, that's my point. So why don't we let everybody weigh in on where their comfort level is with it before we...
I'll amend my motion to include the town engineer in the conversation with Green International, and whatever the dollar amount is to repair the catch basin,
The
to be
drainage
with
detention basin.
the drainage detention pond.
But it's not just that now. It's the other stuff that's going along with K, right? You were asking for
That's a
release of
separate
K
bond.
as well.
Separate
We're
pond.
looking to set a bond.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
set
for Fur Lane, you have the tri-party agreement in place for
For three.
270, and they're looking to reduce that.
Right, well, that's been paved, the water's in, all the drainage is in. To my knowledge, everything's functioning properly.
We don't release anything until we get it in, on paper, in front of us, that everybody's weighed in on it. That's
Well, if I
the,
could, Mark, that's what I thought had happened here.
And we don't have anything.
And this,
Right.
you know, I'm the builder on site, and Dave is the one that handles the engineering. My understanding was this was all agreed by all parties. This is the first I'm hearing about any of this the loose ends.
And I'm just trying to keep it moving forward so that all parties, I'm just, one thing this doesn't need to be, because it doesn't need to be adversarial, so I'm trying to make sure that we can keep things moving. And I have faith in the developer that he isn't going anywhere, and that, they've done a fine project so far, and I have no issue with releasing a bond under the conditions that the town engineer and the peer reviewer, our third party, set an amount that works.
And that's how the process works. really.
Usually when we do it, peer review is here, the bond is here. All the
I've made my
others-
motion. If nobody wants to second it, they don't have
I'm
to.
just trying to say, we don't have a piece of paper in front of us.
All right, so then,
That's all I'm trying to say. I have no problem with meeting next week if we have to give them the money. I have no problem releasing the money. I just want to make sure that we're not cutting ourselves short. We've been
I thought my motion would guarantee that we got the money.
I'll second it.
I think there's too many outstanding questions that we should probably hold off and make sure that the engineer and Green and everybody has actually.
Can you make a motion to
Done with
continue to the next meeting then?
When would you like to discuss?
What's the next earliest meeting, so we can put them on the agenda?
I think this is when we could probably,
October 4th,
Yeah.
it's 2 weeks.
I think that's fair, given what we put him through tonight.
I'll meet before then. I have no problem. If we can get everybody to sit down and make sure.
Mr. Fennell, would you mind waiting 2 weeks for the release?
You personally? No?
You don't mind?
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
I'll second her motion.
All right, we'll put you on first thing on that, and we'll have
That would be helpful, first thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, first thing, yeah.
So, he'll be on the agenda at 6:35?
6:35, yeah. 6:35 on the 4th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
See you.
Or have we already committed that to somebody?
Jennifer, you came back. You missed me so much.
I missed you so much, and I realized after I walked out the door that this release that you have very kindly agreed to tonight, thank you for that, it's very helpful. We do have a couple of buyers who are very anxious to close on their units, and I just wanted to coordinate when we might be able to get signatures from this esteemed board. If I
With the A&R, so is there any?
Just, not the
It's-
A&R,
there's
just
a
the
lot
release of the
form.
55 and over lot.
Do you have the wording for the release in Word form?
I could, can we print it here? Do we have, no.
Mom, if you want to send it out tomorrow, I can send it back scanned and signed, so.
No, so you gotta go to town council, don't you?
No, it's
No.
Okay.
it's the
Standard
same
form.
form as,
All right.
so if
Can
we
you,
had, if I.
do you have our emails?
I do not have your direct emails, I have Marin's, I could, so if I send it to Marin.
Send it to Anthony?
Yep.
Send it out?
I can send it out tomorrow.
Okay.
And so then could I send my client back to pick it up from you tomorrow?
From one of them tomorrow? I'm not in tomorrow.
I'm not in tomorrow, I'm out of town. You need all our signatures, don't they?
You need at least 3
Yeah.
signatures.
Can't do it till Monday, I'm sorry. I'm leaving 6:30 tomorrow morning for Nashville.
Can you supply an electronic signature through email?
It has to be recorded, so I think we're gonna need originals.
Yeah, you're gonna need them.
How about, could we, if we circulate it to you tomorrow, could we get you to sign? Are people available Monday morning to sign? Then we could scurry around and get it.
If you don't mind coming to the town of Concord to,
I love the town of Concord. I do.
my office has moved, so we're actually in 2 locations. I'm not sure which one I'll be, but your clients have my phone number, so by all means, call me. I will make arrangements.
That's, okay, one, Mr. Montanari, where might,
Oh, Monday I can do it.
okay, would you be here at,
I can be around, yeah.
Okay.
I fly in late Sunday night, I'll be around Monday.
all right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, I'm very much appreciate it. Anna, where may we find you?
Tomorrow.
In the common.
She'll be in town. She'll,
Okay.
you can track her down.
Either that or bring it tomorrow and we'll come to her and sign it.
Yeah.
Entirely, either one.
Thank you.
Mondays are hard for me to get there, so if somebody finds me during the day, it'll be better. Okay?
Absolutely. Either tomorrow.
You might have to run over for him, but
you there tomorrow?
What's that?
Are you in Concord tomorrow?
Aye.
You can get his tomorrow and us on Monday.
All right,
All right, thank you.
we're trying to work, figure that out.
All right,
Thank you
thanks.
all. We'll
All right.
Have a
Are we
good night.
done?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Hey,
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Done.
tell me when we're off.